Okay, good morning and welcome everyone to our first research symposium, Plurilingualism in Language Education. This event is organized by the Master's Program in Foreign Language Teaching and Learning. I'm Janet Ortiz, the coordinator of the program, and I'm very happy to greet you all and welcome you to this conversation and learning space that we're gonna have for these 2 days. I would like to start by thanking our guests who kindly accepted sharing their work during this symposium. Dr. Elena Shohami from Tel Aviv University in Israel, Dr. Angela Chris from the University of Stirling, who will be joining us tomorrow, Dr. Amparo Clavijo from Universidad Distrital Francisco José de Caldas, Dr. Isabel Tejada Sánchez from Universidad de los Andes, Dr. Germana Carolina Soler and Dr. Guillaume Ruz from Universidad de Caldas, Dr. Norbella Miranda Nieves and Dr. José Aldemar Álvarez from Universidad del Valle, Dr. Paula Andrea Echeverri Sucerquia and Dr. Jaime Usma from the University of Antioquia. I would also like to thank and introduce the members of the program's academic committee for organizing this event. They are here with their cameras on to say hello. Dr. Adriana Gonzalez, Dr. Ana Maria Sierra. We have Dr. Diana Pineda. She will join us in a while. And we have our 5th cohort student representative, Laura Andrea Medina. I would also like to thank the professors and alumni from the program who will be helping us during the event. Professors Claudia Mesa, Mauri Aguirre, Diana Calderón, Jorge Pineda, Ivan Flores, Juan David Castaño, and our academic support, Sergio Trujillo, and our assistant, Sara Vanegas. Many thanks as well to the technical support and communication staff, Miguel Martin, Diana Gomez, Carlos Colorado, and Karen Gomez. Researchers, scholars, teacher educators, and language educators who have gathered here today have something in common. We value diversity, and we want speakers and learners of different languages in our territories to be treated with respect, to be valued with their different identities, views, sociocultural backgrounds, and to be granted equal opportunities to participate in society and to improve their living conditions. We hope our conversations during these 2 days help us explore our academic interests and experiences searching for a common ground around plurilingualism in language education, trigger conversations on our social responsibility as researchers and educators to respond to the challenges of teaching languages in a culturally and linguistically diverse country like Colombia, and encourage our reflection on how, as language teacher educators and researchers in the region, we can respond to our context need to include and balance the power relations among local and foreign languages. We also want to set the basis for future networking and collaboration among the master's program academic community, research groups, and independent researchers from participating institutions at the local and national level. Through this event, we also want to contribute to the implementation of our improvement plan derived from the program's evaluation process that has been recently conducted before Consejo Nacional de Acreditación. Now, I will give you some guidelines about the participation dynamics during this symposium. We encourage the audience on Zoom and the audience that are following our event on YouTube to write their questions and comments on the chat as they listen to the different presentations. At the end of each presentation, there will be 10 minutes to address these questions. And in addition, at the end of the morning, we will have a conversation with the morning presenters. Moderators will consider the questions from the chats that were unanswered and also the direct questions from the audience during this conversation. Let us begin now with our opening talk by Dr. Elena Shohami from Tel Aviv University in Israel. She's a professor of multilingual education at Tel Aviv University, where she focuses on research on language policy, language testing, and linguistic landscape within a critical paradigm. examining issues of equality, fairness, inclusion, justice, and rights as these relate to multilingual people in education and society. Within language policy, her current research addresses the developments of multilingual engaged language policies initiated by teachers, schools, and other community members. Within language testing, her work focuses on the basis of discrimination in academic learning against immigrants and minority students due to their multilingual competences, which are not recognized in schools, and introduces multilingual tests. Within linguistic landscape, she focuses on students and adults developing critical awareness of inequality and exclusion of public spaces via documentation, analysis, and development of effective strategies for activism to modify these spaces, and in favor of language learning, which is more just and inclusive. In 2010, she was granted the ILTA Lifetime Academic Award for her work on critical language testing. She authored a number of books, such as The Power of Tests in 2001, Language Policy in 2006, and a number of edited books, like the Encyclopedia of Language and Assessment in 2018, an ample number of articles and chapters on the above topics. Let me just add that Dr. Elena Shohami has been our invited professor to the program since the first cohort, and she's very close to our hearts. Well, let's welcome Dr. Elena Shohami today. Doctor, we are delighted and honored to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Janet. That's very nice to acknowledge my connection with you. And I really feel that I'm part of the program for 12 years. The University of Antioquia is kind of another home. And it's really unfortunate that, fortunate and unfortunate that I cannot really be there now. I mean, physically, I could be there in spirit, of course, and seeing you all. So on the other hand, we should be very happy that we are able to use Zoom and really be in contact, because we would have missed lots of interactions among different people around the world. And I find that it's really an opportunity to expand our knowledges, although we cannot fly, or we don't want to fly in this time. We really are able to have contacts. I'm teaching a course now at the program, at the MA program, and I meet the students every Saturday afternoon for me, morning for them, and we spend 4 hours together, and it's really a great pleasure. And sometimes I don't even remember that I'm actually in Tel Aviv, because especially, I was saying the other day, especially with the names are so much not Hebrew names, and I propose diversity, and just talking to students, to names of students like Jose and Ana Maria, to see Ana Maria and Adriana and Carlos, and even the names themselves already do something to my brain already. It's very interesting, because just, you know, if you see an English name, you're kind of used to it, you see, but to see Spanish names, it's like kind of a connection with the language from far away. So really, it's wonderful, and I'm so glad to the university, and especially to Janet and to other people, that I'm able to really create this kind of connection with all of you. And I'm so glad you invited me again to teach the course, and just to be continued next year and the following or whatever. So let's hope at least we don't continue with the pandemic, but only with good purposes of meeting, right? And okay, so now let me just start talking to you. I'm going to talk about one topic, and in fact, the topic I'm talking about, language policy, includes some of the things that Janet mentioned about language policy. So this is directly built on something we are actually did for 3 years now. I'll just kind of move back to my, okay, why is it, wait, why am I not, wait. Okay, here. So what I'm going to talk about, I'll talk really about this project that we've been engaged in for 3 years now, and actually was supposed to finish, but because of the pandemic, we can't really enter schools and try out all those beautiful things we've done. But one of the things I'd like to say is that it's very based on research. What I'm going to talk to you today about research, because one of the things we know about multilingualism, that it's really not researched enough. It's more an ideology, and we don't really know what multilingualism is. I mean, is it number of languages, but not all languages count the same? Are we talking about national languages? What do we mean when talking about multilingualism, multilingual education? And we were lucky, very lucky, that our university, our government decided one day, and it's not just luck, decided one day to write to us and to publish a call for papers, for proposals, for people to talk about multilingual education and research it. So Michal Tenenbaum, you see her name here, and myself, we wrote this proposal, and we won the proposal, which meant a good amount of money for 3 years. We were able to bring people from abroad, and actually it was a very nice experience, and we involved all our students in projects and so on. So this is what I will talk about mostly, is about the role of research in doing multilingual policy. And just to say, we just got a contract, not just about 3 months ago, with Routledge to actually put together a book. And the book is supposed to put together everything, the procedure that we did in order to arrive at this language policy. So I'll start by just giving some background, just so you'll know a little bit about Israel, very multilingual country. I'm not going to go into details, but mostly Hebrew is the national language. Arabic was also, but last year, according to some political oppositions, Arabic is no more an official language. But what I wanted to say, in spite of everything and all the controversies, that's political and economic and everything, in 2016, the Ministry of Education advertised this call for proposals, and they specifically called it a new multilingual language education policy. That was a big surprise, big shock for us, because for 20 years, we've been actually busy doing all kind of advocacy work, which I'll mention in a minute, to convince the government that this is what we have to do. So all of a sudden, out of the blue, this call for proposals come up. And of course, we wrote right away, within a few weeks, we wrote a proposal and we won. So basically, it was also a response to language policy of 1996 that Professor Spolsky, Bernard Spolsky, and myself did for Israel. And that was not funded so much, but basically we arrived at something that's called 3+ for Jewish students who speak Hebrew. You'll have Hebrew, and you have to learn Arabic, you have to learn English, and additional languages such as heritage languages and other languages. Unfortunately, that part of the policy, which was resulted in a book in 1999, it's called The Languages of Israel, actually it didn't work very well. I mean, some people studied Arabic anymore, but we thought that the impact should have been much bigger than what happened. So this is really the 1996 Minister of Education, a call for new, 2006.
Elena,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you like to share your screen, your presentation?
What do you mean? It's not shared?
It's not being shared yet.
Oh, I see. I don't know. What did I do? Wait. Oh,
no problem.
Oh, wait. How do I get to it now? It's not shared. Wait, I have to maybe minimize it. I'm so sorry. I have to do the share, right? Share screen and share.
Perfect.
You see it now?
Perfect. We are seeing your desktop. If you can just open the window of your PowerPoint presentation, that would be fine. Perfect. Now we can see it. Yes.
Okay. So sorry that I didn't know. Wow. Next time, tell me in the middle because it's very bad. Anyway, so I wanted to show you what I showed before. Here, 1 second. I just take this away, maybe. What is this? I don't know. Okay. So let me, I don't know if I should repeat what I said before or not. Or
Elena, I don't think so. I think you can go on.
All right, okay, because I'm quite conscious about the time. So what brought about the change? This is what I want to mention to you. What brought about the change? And in 2000 and I think 18, we were in a conference in New Zealand. And for those of you who know Steve May from New Zealand, he invited us to do a symposium about advocacy. And we tried to put together a number of examples about advocacy in foreign language learning. In how do we do other things. And one of the papers that we wrote was a paper about how to actually make a change. And I'm going to mention it briefly because the paper is a special issue, Advocacy in Language Policy, are coming out in the journal Language Policy within 1 or 2 issues. So it's it gives examples from around the world of 8 papers from different cases. So the issue of advocacy is very important. So, wait. Okay, so here the advocacy, the background of advocacy. So we try to develop how come this new multilingual policy of Israel came about. And we try to understand what is it. So I'm not going to go over everything because this is part of our paper that I would like you to read. The issue of advocacy and activism is very big today, just so you'll know. So contacts with top policy makers in the ministry, multilingual education program at Tel Aviv University, we changed our name. No more language teaching, it became multilingual education. So the name of our program, expanding professional organization that we created contacts with, and we tried to explain why it's important. All our research studies were really focused on issues of multilingualism. We had conferences and seminars where we invited people from the Ministry of Education. We created personal contacts with all kinds of people at the ministry. And all those together, we think really, really contributed to the idea. The idea was plugged into those people's brains. And this is when a call came out. That was one of the calls about multilingual education. I would say it took us about 20 years to do that. Okay, so I just want to say something. I just remembered I talked about it in Colombia last time I was there. So we're talking about 3 types of policies. Central bodies on the nation state level, the government decides on policies. And you can see it here, and I'll leave you the PowerPoint so everything you'll be able to see. Policies are driven mostly by national ideologies, okay? And national ideologies, most of the time, won't pick something which is bottom up. They will really give advantages to languages of power. Now, municipalities of like the city of Tel Aviv has all kind of ideas about language policy as a city. So these you see in many places in the world now. You see an example now in Norway and Oslo. They say, let's make a language policy for Oslo. Let's make it, Angela, I think Angela and I can't remember her husband's name now. Angela, they wrote a paper about language policies in different areas in England, for example, okay? So these policies oftentimes reflect and incorporate the unique nature and features of these local entities, often even neighborhoods, zones, or even single streets. So the whole idea of national policy is really a facade because we have to talk really about what happens in a city. Cities are like people, they're different from one another. We know that. I went to visit Bogota. It's very much not like Medellin. Medellin is a different planet really compared to Bogota. So I think we're talking also about that. We are talking about schools and institutions. We have lots of schools. There is a school in trilingual school teaches 3 languages. Only that school. It doesn't mean that the city it teaches those languages. And I'm sure you see lots of examples in Colombia where the schools are teaching German or other things. So we're talking also about policies are generated by principals, teachers, communities, and so on. So this is something I talked about also a few years ago. And the policy of schools is very interesting because each school has its own surrounding, religion, SES, multilingualism, different languages that people use, and so on. So the principle of our proposal. So in our proposal, we were engaged in three things. One is called engaged multilingual educational policies. And this is based on the work of Catherine Davis, the late Catherine Davis. She died a year ago, from Hawaii. And she wrote a special issue in the journal of 2014. She edited it, but it's all about what we call engaged multilingual policy. It's no more top-down. That's the point. Schools create their own language policies according to their educational visions and demographic profiles in partnership with, oftentimes, with universities. And the issue of multilingual education policy driven by research. And this is what I'll focus on today. So first of all, engaged language policy, Catherine Davis talked, refers to transformative dialogue in institutional spaces, schools. It represents a shift from top-down national policies to recognition of the complex interplay of ideologies and institutional practices. There are consequently something. It's really, we talk about something which is reflective versus imposed. And I think, what is this community? What languages are being used here? How can we cultivate them? Versus the imposed language policy by governments, where the idea is one size fits all. And we are very much against that. So here is the plan of what we did in our project. So we survey existing multilingual education in Israel and around the world. Word supposed to be here, oh, sorry. And what we found also, wait, I have to go back. Oh, wait. Sorry, how do I go back? The back doesn't work. Wait. Like this, no. Somehow cannot go to the back, wait. Sorry, here. Okay, now we are okay, okay. So, so here we're talking about, this is where we found out that there was so little in the world about research on language policy. And we decided, and we identified then the 2018 to 19 questions and issues. What are the most important issues that need to be researched before we introduce the multilingual policy? Conducting research to solve the questions and gain the insight regarding the policy. So this is really what I'll talk about today. But we did all these other things, and why do I say the line? Because the line, why did I put the line, is where we stopped doing the work because of COVID. We couldn't really have opportunities to enter schools while we had planned to go into school and try out the policy. So experiment with different models of selected, all these things we didn't really get to do, and hopefully we will do here. We hope 21, 22, it looks like it's gonna be 20, maybe later, okay. And then we plan to revise the policy and see how it works. So what are some of the issues? And these are the issues I will focus on. One is translanguaging in the English classroom. Turns out that translanguaging is a very, very confused topic, because with translanguaging, the idea is to use, let's say, Spanish and English, Hebrew and English. Can the English teacher use Hebrew in an English class? Same thing in Spanish. I mean, when can we use it's a class of English? How much do we stick to this idea of the old idea in many ways that it's English only and not allowed to talk other languages? Third one was, or the second one here, multilingual test and assessment procedures. And Janet already mentioned what I'm working on now a lot, the multilingual policies, test policies. And the third one was multilingual awareness, using linguistic landscape for developing multilingual awareness for justice. So I'm gonna quickly go through each one and you'll see what we found. So multilingual research question one, translanguaging in the English classroom, EFL teachers' belief and practices regarding the use of the learner's language repertoire, differences in EFL teachers' belief, what do they believe about the use of other languages? Implications for the new multilingual education policy. And basically what we found, I will probably here, this is our data, how many people we interviewed. We did observations in the classrooms, and teachers, you'll see teachers are very confused. They think they don't use native language at all, but in fact they do. So that was very interesting as well. I'm going to the findings. Two major conflicting and contradictory beliefs were identified. The learner's language repertoire as a hindrance. Some teachers thought it's a hindrance, L1. Some people thought the language was a resource, almost split half and half. Mild relationship between teachers' belief and practices, and mild belief between. Differences were found among teachers by factors such as country of origin, native, non-native, position of the school. Teachers really varied by what they thought. If it was a native speaker, she or he thought it's very good to use English only because they didn't know Hebrew, for example, things like that. 80% of the teachers reported, and I think this is very important, they had not studied the topic of using learners' language repertoires in the classroom, not even in the pre or in-service classes. And interview, we did lots of interviews. Interviews support the quantitative findings of conflicting views toward the use of L1, L2 in the classroom, which we call translanguaging here. The supervisors and heads of EFL departments in the focus group report that they promote monolingual English teaching only, but they are aware of the fact that teachers do use learners L1 behind the classroom door. Yet they fear that there will be over-reliance on learners L1. I'm sure you can identify with lots of those points. From the observation, we learned that teachers use the learners L1 all the time in various pedagogical contexts, but in the interview, they were commented they feel guilty about it. Okay, so this is the example. You have some examples here. I'm going to continue, but here I use Hebrew in the case. I have to translate a word from English into Arabic, but the word in Hebrew is easier to understand. This is somebody who's trilingual. For instance, the word already, the equivalent in Hebrew, kvar, is more comprehensible for the pupil than the Arabic word, which is less frequent. And so they give lots of reasons and we compile them all. So conclusions from question one. Question one basically says that, where is it? Okay, tension between the current policy and the actual classroom practices. There's no official legitimacy for multilingualism in the classroom. The contribution to the new multilingual education is the promotion and incorporation of effective uses of the learners' repertoires in English and in another language they know. Further research is urgently needed in order to fully understand the very situation in which multilingual repertoires can be beneficial for learning. Subsequently, it is essential to provide guidelines concerning the use of learners' repertoire with clear examples, curricula and policy document. As we move to question two, which is multilingual assessment, I would say basically this is something that, like Janet said, I've been busy with for a long, long time. I have a paper published in the Mother Language Journal that became very popular in 2011. I have a second study that I gave in Bogota when we were there a few years ago. And for us, this was the opportunity to have large samples once we got funded and try it out and how does it work, not just with immigrants, but also with Arab students, which one can call indigenous in Israel. And they learn everything in Arabic. Okay, this is just the original finding, which shows you that immigrant children who had to do a mathematics test in two languages, which is the blue line, Hebrew and Arabic, you'll see in Hebrew and English, Hebrew and Russian, did much better than those students who got it only in Hebrew. So you can see, and the advantages were for 12 years. You'll see in a minute what we mean. And there was other things, but we have another study, don't want to talk about it now, but it's a study that we have never published, Ofra Bar and myself, about how much students actually liked it. They said they need their L1. To a certain extent, to a limited extent, not at all. Almost everybody said they need it. For example, what do you need it for? Understand instructions, understand words, understand terms, planning how to write the answers, and other things. So they were very enthusiastic about it, both people who used the Hebrew version and the Russian. They needed both, in fact. So there is a strong need for multilingual assessment, for multilingual learning. Effects of multilingual tests on the performance of students for whom Hebrew is an L2 for different groups, for Arab indigenous, I said, and for Russians. Okay, so this was our research. I'm gonna go fast, but I want you to see, we tested not just immigrants, Russians, but also Arab speakers who grow up in Israel, born in Israel, and actually they learn in Arabic in schools and in 2 cities, different cities. And this is what we had in terms of the design, questionnaires, focus groups, protocols. We always work with at least 5 data collection methods. We gave a test like this to the Russian students. We gave them writing tasks, attitude questionnaires, and so on. Here, this is what a multilingual test looks like. You see the Hebrew version of the same item, and you have the Russian version. Students get the 2 versions, one next to the other in front of them, actually. And they can answer in any language they want. Okay, here, for example, you see the experimental group was the group that got the 2 languages. And look, they got, in math, they got 15.3, and the control group got 8.27. In other words, the group who got Hebrew only got half the score, 50% of what the experimental group, where they had both languages with them. So lots of important data here, findings here. Arabic speaking students in heterogeneity, no significant. Then you come to Arab students in homogeneity, you see some differences. And most students were in favor of the bilingual exam because it gave them the freedom to choose the language that was more convenient for them. Sometimes one word can throw me off, says one student. The presence of Russian gives me confidence. Somebody else said, some Arab students wrote that they were in favor of learning more educational materials in Hebrew because they would need it for their future academic setting in Israel. So you see that students actually prefer that. In fact, we can say that there are 3 patterns. Type 1, a student tried to answer questions in Hebrew, looked at the Russian to verify he understood the task correctly. When he noticed that he had misunderstood the question in Hebrew, he felt frustrated and switched to Russian only in the writing class. He did not even try to write the Hebrew. Then you have type B, a student began the examination in Hebrew, could not understand all the questions and needed the Russian language in order to understand the answer and answer in Hebrew. In the writing task, he switched to Russian. So sometimes the reading is okay, but the writing is not the same. And type C, a student showed confidence in Hebrew, answered the test, and did the writing task all in Hebrew. At the same time, he needed to look at the Russian translation in order to make sure he had understood everything correctly. So you see how different students use it in different ways. I'm not going to do so much more with that. How much time do I have, Janet?
Elena, you have still 15 minutes.
Oh, very good. Thank you so much.
That's
okay, besides the questions, right? For the talk.
No, 15 minutes for your presentation, and then we will have 10 minutes for questions.
Very good. Okay. So conclusions about the multilingual assessment. I want to tell you it's already being used in a number of schools in Israel. Results point to the advantages of multilingual testing for academic achievement and well-being. Multilingual tests vary among different groups, Arabs and Russians. It doesn't hold the same for every ethnic group. This is the first time somebody found it. It's okay, but not for everyone. Some people need it, depends, even in a mixed town where Arab and Jews live together, and a homogeneous town where only Arabs live by themselves, it's very different results. The contribution to the new multilingual education policy is the incorporation of multilingual assessment in different formats to ensure equality, equity, and justice. In other words, language opportunity versus language liability. Okay, let's go to the last one, research question number, language policy research question 3, multilingual awareness via linguistic landscape. I'm sure you all know what linguistic landscape is by now. I gave a talk at Medellin before, and I know and lots of others, including Doris, Correa, are all doing this kind of work. So I want to just show you something. We did an experiment, which is really very interesting. And this we did with high school students, 11th and 12th grade high school. 2 classes in Hebrew medium school teaching English, and 1 class in an Arabic medium school teaching Hebrew. And this is what they had to do. This is what we do. If you want, you can look at the whole program of how we planned. Teacher take pictures in the linguistic landscape. Teacher introduces the linguistic landscape concept, a discussion of social issues and discrimination about linguistic landscape. Students sort out the pictures. They look at it critically. Students select 1 picture they perceive is unjust, and then they document and the modification. They have to really change. Students present their work in class, and you'll see exactly what I mean in a minute. And then we have reflections. Now, here is an example. Students, they themselves, they thought about, they saw a sign, 2 students work together, a pair, and it says something, this is the place, and they said it in Hebrew and in English. Now, this is a child who's not Arab speaking, and the children said, 2 children, sorry, okay. And they said, they changed the sign, not in life, but they changed the sign on the computer, okay? But instead of just writing it in Hebrew and English, they actually changed it to Hebrew and English instead of what it says here. Sorry, they added Arabic here for people to understand. And this is how they explain their change. Since in Israel, we have Jews and Arabs, we would add a line, I left the mistakes, the student's mistake, we didn't change it, a line in Arabic, so almost all of the community in this place that concludes Arabs and Jews would be able to understand this sign and know where they are. So again, students decide on something that they see as discriminatory, they change it to make it more fair and more inclusive, and they explain why they did it. Take another example. This is an example of, again, the same class who's learning English is a medium of instruction, and they are Hebrew speakers. And here you see a stadium, it's a football game. And look what the student said. We would remove the flag of Israel here on the left, but just because it makes the fans and some of the players to feel that they are not related. Maybe this removal will make them feel better and not strangers to the game. We can argue about it, but I think this is very interesting that students themselves changed and gave the rationale how they would change the sign. Another thing, font size is a factor. Here you have water bottle, and the students, what did they do? They put it in, added Arabic also, and they explained. We would add Hebrew to the sign in big fonts, as leave the language translation in a smaller font. In addition, we would add Arabic in a smaller font. So they have there, and they mention here also that there are all those languages. Okay, this means ish tabach, means bread, meat, and everything in between. This is the name of a restaurant. And here what they, oh, sorry. Okay, and here what did they do? They crossed everything. They crossed the word meat, they crossed everything between. They just left the word on the right, which means lechem, which means bread, only bread. And they said, this sentence is problematic because it's not place for vegetarians. And I'm vegan, and I think good pastries and good bread, everyone loves. So you see again how they come up with the reasons, whatever the reasons are. This is a bus, on a public bus. And it says here, this is a group that is speaking Hebrew and learning English. And they say, this is a stop. Why put a stop bus like this here? We chose to repair the incorrect picture in our opinion. At the original picture, we don't like the fact that there is only the English language there. We replaced the button with stop sign because everybody knows what it means. It's also noticeable and can replace Hebrew, English, and Arabic together. We also believe that the red color is much more suitable and no one can miss it. I'll give you two more maybe. This is again the group that learns in Hebrew, but English is their second language. And this means, it says here, together for a greener life. And the poor people add, the students add the word chok. Chok means law, a law, and that's what they said. We would change the title of the sign from Together for a Greener Life to New Law for Greener Life, to clearly say this is a must and not upon anyone's choice, okay? And we have more, you see like something in Hebrew, and then they put Arabic, it's in their Arab town. We see, and they explain also, I don't want to take more time. And here there's something that says a sign, it's either us or them. You see Arabs, Arabic, Palestinian, or the Islamic party flag, and you see the Hebrew flag. And they say either, this ze anachnu ohem, it's either us or them. Now they change it to this. And this means we erased the word al, the letter aleph, and we left the word vav, because our message should be that in this country live two nations in peace and with no racism and no hate and no anger. So in other words, instead of saying it's either us or them, which was a campaign, very bad campaign, it's like somebody in the US says it's either the black or the whites. He said it's not the black or white, it's the blacks and whites. And he just added one letter to change it. There was another one about a sign that a woman, it's against violation against women. And you can see that this, it says here, this stain will not get removed in the laundry. And they change the sign and they make it differently. And they say, and they added here, the blood of women is not for free. And then they say, in fact, I didn't have to change anything. I just made it more friendly, I would say, and I added the Arabic, because adding the Arabic means that it's not just an issue of Jewish people who speak Hebrew, but it's also issues of Arab people. So you can see how sensitive, and look how much they wrote about it, because they were telling here about their lives and so on. Okay, I will not continue more with more examples, but I think you got the point. And here you see also a similar thing of somebody who symbolizes the Jew and somebody who symbolizes the Arab. And you can see, and these are kind of cultural mythologies. And you see that here the Arab is kind of, the Jewish kind of looks like that, with the hands like this. And the students, the Arab students say, look how long, if we will look at this sign, we see that the Arab is kind of, that the Jewish looks as if he's welcoming. And here we put an X, he's not really welcoming us. He's not giving us equal rights. So, and look how much they wrote. As I said, like here, what about the typewriter? How come we don't have typewriter in Arabic letters? So they use a new typewriter, keyboard, to add, and explained, of course, what. So the main findings of this third study was that, number one, multilingual awareness is so important. Before we even teach about the number of languages, what do people know about multilingual awareness? So all students focused on language equality. They used LL, linguistic, and to protest against social justice. Students from minority groups, the Arabs, tended to correct mistakes in Arabic. They occasionally deleted Hebrew or English and promoted Arabic. They tended to focus more on issues such as domestic violence, racism, minority language, because they are the victims and they feel that this pain of not having their language. And the students from the Hebrew group, they said they used LL to promote various social issues such as veganism, ecology, and the accessibility of science. So implications of LL study to new multilingual education policy, the need to teach language awareness and provide students with tools to critically assess language in public space as a method of increased awareness. The project is being displayed in social science library now at the university, open to the public, anybody can go, except the opening day was supposed to be March 12th, and you all know what happened on March 12th, 2020. This is the day that they closed the schools, they closed the university, they closed everything, and we turned to Zoom. The exhibit is still at the university. They don't want to remove it, and we're waiting. Just yesterday, we heard an announcement that the library is going to be open again. So hopefully we'll be able to make this very festive opening, bring the students and show how they are identifying with some of those changes to make language and public space more fair and equal. So, but the last slide, the multilingual education policy will eventually be implemented, we hope, by the fall. Multilingual education policy needs to be viewed as a dynamic and evolving process. Hence, it has to be continually evaluated and transformed. Research is at the core of the process of crafting policies in order to ensure their validity and relevance at given moments and situated contexts. Such policies can be achieved through approaches of engaged language policies involving collaborative partnerships of researchers, schools, and broader communities. Just to remind you that we are talking about schools will create their own policy along with us, but research is critical to resolve major language issues and introduce a fair, just, equal, and inclusive language policy. And I wanted to tell you that the last part of our research was really to come up with all kinds of teaching ideas and methods of teaching multilingually. And this is part of the report that we turned into the government. Now, the next phase is to try out these things in schools, in different schools around the country. And hopefully we'll be able to come up with multilingual education policy that suits everybody, that also is not just number of languages, but it brings in equality and justice and inclusion. And as the last slide, oh, why can't I get it? Okay, what happened to the last slide, which says, can you tell them, Janet, what it says? Because you saw that, oh, here it is. Okay, so this is for you. We say, okay, and in Hebrew and in Arabic. And I'm open to questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elena, for that inspiring and enlightening presentation. So I would like to invite the audience to ask their questions while they take the floor. I'm going to ask one question that we have here.
Can I see the audience now or not really? I can do stop share, right? Okay, now
yeah.
I see the
okay, now you can see us. Okay, so the question is...
so strange not to see anybody.
Yes, it's better to see your faces. The question, for the first question for you, Elena, is as a researcher, you have always sustained that multilingualism is crucial in constructing a more robust social fabric in diverse Israel. You have visited Colombia various times and perhaps are aware of our traditionally disregarded linguistic diversity. What lessons may you share with us from your experience with all of this work in Israel, Elena?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. And I would say, for me, it was pretty shocking. And Brianna remembers that because we went on a trip together. And I remember said, what's happening here about indigenous languages? What happens with all the other languages that are being used here? And basically the answer we got, this was like 12 or 14 years ago, that not much is being done in your program, in the English program. I'm not saying that there are no programs that focus on that. So I've been following this, how is it moving over the years? And I think there is much more attention to that. But some of the things I said in class was also, and you always said, oh, we don't have immigrants. People would say, what do you mean? Oh, because people come from Venezuela, they know Spanish. But you know, you were there, Janet, in some of the groups and during the testing course that I'm teaching now, it was so interesting how they may know Spanish, but the culture is so different. And the content they learn in Venezuela or other places is so different than what is happening. So the gap is not always language per se. And language is very, very complex. Language could be words, It can be pictures, it can be slogans, it can be equality, who is being discriminated and who is not. It can be differences in social economic status. It can be so many other things. So I think, and I know, and I follow, and I know how many people are coming from Venezuela and other places. Colombia is a well-to-do country now, and it's really important, I think, to view, it's a unique, it's a group, it's different. Like the Arabs are not immigrants in Israel, but, and of course they learn in Hebrew, in Arabic, but they learn Hebrew all the time because they know this is the language of university. So, and they're doing very poorly on Hebrew. So, but here it's not just a language, they're doing very poorly in what is being learned. And I think to have the student, I think it's important to identify some of the issues that those, so to speak, immigrants have. I think Colombia, I think it's very good. I mean, basically you live in a very monolingual environment, but I think it's monolingual on the surface. The differences between Colombia and other countries is huge in many, many ways. So I think what you see here, I mean, we neglect the Arabs too. We neglect immigrants, or sometimes you can see now with the vaccines also. Like we have so many people who are refugees now. The refugees, I mean, it's a huge issue. Should they get vaccinated? Not. The government just made a decision not to vaccinate more than like 10,000. I mean, it's like unbelievable. So I think we have to, the country, if we are talking about diversity, which you did and everybody did, I think it's important to look at more factors which make us diverse. It's no more just, you know, he came from another country. It's much more complicated. And it's a challenge.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Professor. And it goes beyond just speaking a different language, of course, as you have.
Yes. And what is the same language? It's like, you know, now people are very upset about translations. They say translations is colonialization. I'm sure you heard this kind of colonialization. Yes, you translate, you give access, but do you colonialize the environment by bringing your ideas into text that somebody else done? So it's not just, we have to think very strongly beyond language. And in a way, maybe one more point about linguistic landscape. One of the things I like about linguistic landscape is that it's beyond language. You look at lots of semiotics, and some people who read my stuff, they know that for me, language is much beyond just words.
Thank you very much, Professor Shohami. We have another question here on the chat. It says, it is wonderful to see this organic perspective for the construction of language policies. It makes me wonder about the type of struggles you went through before shifting from the traditional top-down national policies. As you may know, in Colombia, we have had top-down language policy that does not necessarily recognize our school's particularities. Can you tell us about those previous challenges?
Okay, that's a good, it's a good point, because look, I just told you that Arabic was abolished 2 years ago, now it's a special status, and the government made this decision. Funny enough, although the government made the decision, you'd think that people will obey the government, remove the signs. In fact, in Tel Aviv, where I live, which is a very liberal city, in this city, people did not remove the Arab signs at all. People, by and large, that just did the opposite. I think it made people even be more positive towards Arabic in terms of, in spite of removing the language. But no, the Arabs themselves are very hurt, of course, very hurt. But you see that we don't always listen to the government in many, many ways. And I think we have lots of degrees of freedom. But look at this project that I'm just reporting to you. Who paid for this project? It's the Ministry of Education. Luckily, we have, it's the Office of the Chief Scientist Office. These are the people we spent lots of time convincing them that this is important. So we need them. They have the money, and we don't always can do it. And we don't want to make them enemies. We would like better to have people in the public, in the ministry, be with us, be convinced that what we are doing is important. And there are very many because there are many immigrants in Israel, and you can see the office, like this one person, Odette, who is working with us, who pushed also the project. She's very, I would say, she's an immigrant. The family is from South America, from Argentina, I think. And almost everybody in this country was an immigrant, and many of them lost the languages. So we hope to create a national mass, but I don't want us to fit. We may fight with the government, the prime minister, and all those ideologues. But we found, as a result of this project, we give them do workshops with them cooperatively. We invited lots of people from abroad, people from the ministry came. So we feel we need to incorporate and work together with the government. So I'm now more into, of course, people want to do their own school, fine. We want to do this multilingual thing. It doesn't have to be the same policy for everyone, but we have to respect the needs of the local communities. But it's a challenge.
It is a huge challenge, Elena, but I think we have a lot to learn from that experience you're sharing with us. And that idea about being strategic, I would say, scholars working on the recognition of diversity, the struggle for the rights of minority languages, and us, of course, working in the teaching and learning processes of foreign languages. We need to be open and willing to work with institutions and with the government organizations to be able to have a greater impact, and little by little transforming these views of monolingualism that are not that do not reflect our reality, and that, of course,
maybe just one more thing, Janet. Oh, yes. Sorry. Just one more thing, and that is the point. Many of our students now, the national supervisor of English studied with us. She did her PhD with me. She doesn't always agree with me. But we have people at the universities. If you come up with ideas like this, you can really connect very well to people. And the person who is a Chinese supervisor did her doctorate with me. I mean, it's like people, we are very much in good contact with them, I would say. And what I just said now, anyway, just to repeat that the university counts.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Elena, for those words.
Sorry that I interrupted.
Well, we have 3 more minutes. I don't know if Professor Sierra and Gonzalez would like to add something or ask one more question. We don't have more questions for now on the chat. Okay, if Professor Gonzalez has a comment, you may go on.
Elena, thank you so much. It's a very provoking presentation, and your new developments are shocking and very inspiring. I just had a comment, because many people believe that Colombia is a monolingual country, as you said, and we have 68 indigenous languages, and those peoples have been discriminated and in many cases left aside from our policies. But there's something else. We have now serious issues with migration, not only with Venezuelans, but in our state, Antioquia, we share the borders with Panama. And there are some kinds of camps where we have lots of African immigrants that speak English, French, and some others from Asia. For example, they speak Bengali, or they speak other languages from Pakistan. And we have not addressed that issue, because we tend to believe that we are so homogeneous, and we are just disregarding this as a potential, not only for sharing some of this research, but also it's a matter of humanity. When they go to those camps that have been improvised, there are no signs in other languages. Right. So your research made me think about that. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity to connect to authorities and think about not only Spanish for Venezuelans, but French. What about Hindi? What about English? And thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Because first of all, thank you for letting me know about Panamas, and people, I'm so happy to hear, because I always have to, people don't talk much about it. It's like in Israel, they say everybody speaks Hebrew. You know, they want, it's wishful thinking by the ideologues, but it's not true. I mean, so many people, you walk in the streets where I live in Tel Aviv, You hear Hebrew, of course, but you hear so many languages. And so I would say one thing is like, you know, I think I shared it with you last time. I still am teaching the past 7 years a course for school principals. I told you about. I can send you a paper about it, Janet, because it's very good. I published about. It's really interesting to work with principals. These are going to be principals, and they talk about language policy the way we talk about now after 4 or 5 classes. And they do lots of linguistic landscape, and they found that Israel is so multilingual in the linguistic landscape, and they talk like linguists now. So I think these are important. Mayors are very important. I think I'm going to try to get a course with mayors. They are confused. Those people come, they don't know what to do. And I learned it in Monica Barney in Italy. She works, because there are lots of small Italian cities, and she works with mayors. And I once gave a talk for them, and they didn't know what to do. They're confused. On one hand, they get this, they don't know much about it. So I think we have to reach a broader audience.
Thank you very much, Professor Shohami. Like, the passion you put into everything you share with us really inspires us to continue working in our country on a similar agenda. Thank you very much. Now, Professor Sierra is going to introduce our next presenter this morning.
Okay, thank you. So I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Paula Echeverri, our director of the School of Languages. She's a professor, a researcher at the School of Languages. She holds an MA, an MS, and a PhD in education, curriculum and instruction from Southern Illinois University in the United States. Her areas of interest are critical pedagogy, curriculum development, culture, and identity. And I think she was very shy in writing more information about her bio, but that's what we have so far. So, Paula, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We're very happy to have you here and share your insights with all of us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. You forgot to say that you're my friend too.
Yeah, we're friends.
Well, hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to say hi to Elena and seeing her after such a long time. And thank you, Elena, for accepting to be with us again in the program and today in this event. I also, as a director, have to thank my colleagues in the Master's Committee. I think this was a great idea for our community. It is the topic that you're bringing to the floor today is absolutely relevant. And of course, I have to say hi to my former students in the master's program and to our alumni, who I know are very well recognized in our region. So congratulations for that too. I'm hoping I can share my screen now. Please let me know if I can share and if you can see. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay. Here I am attempting to do something, and which is to bring about ideas from. I'm sorry, my dog is barking just outside from my study. Here I'm trying to do something that I think it's interesting, and I apologize in advance with my fellow colleague researchers for bringing to the discussion ideas from 2 different research projects. 2 research projects that I'm leading right now. I'm gonna tell you very briefly about these 2 studies, and those 2 related to plurilingualism. And I'm also, please forgive me if I am not delving into the specifics of the theoretical framework or the statistics, because I would like to bring into the conversation more information about how our multilingual context, the University of Antioquia, reflects diversity that actually Adriana, with her comments, brought about, although not to the level that Elena depicted with the examples that she brought today. So my presentation is Plurilingualism at Universidad de Antioquia, a diagnosis of language use and investment among undergraduate students. I've been curious for the past 15 years on issues of identity, even though this is really the first time that I name it such as that. As some of you know, last year, research that I conducted when I was in the US with immigrant and sojourner families in the US. All this research became a publication, and that was a book that actually arrived in my hands this week. And I am happy to see that from that research to here, that research brought me up to this point. As I told you, I am combining here some preliminary results, because we are at the point of data analysis, preliminary results of these two different projects. One is a diagnosis of plurilingualism needs in Antioquia, our department, and we are trying to identify in a large research team. We are trying to identify these needs in terms of education, commerce, government issues, and the productive sector. Also, I am leading another project that started about the same time. Both of them are at the same point now. The second one is second language, or in general, language use and investment among university students at UDA. And what we are trying to do in this study is to describe language. Here I use L2, but in general, we are focusing on language. Language use among undergraduate students at Universidad de Antioquia, as well as their investments in the learning of that other language. In these two different projects, there is participation, and I want to give credit to my colleagues and my fellow students also participating in this project. There are actually master's students participating in both of the projects. In the diagnosis of plurilingualism in Antioquia, there are 4 of our research groups participating. That you can see there: cultural identity and language education, research action and evaluation, foreign languages, pedagogy and didactics, and translation studies. In the other project, 2 of these groups are participating. These are the members, our team members in both of the groups. As you can see, the diagnosis of plurilingualism in Antioquia is a large team. And of course, we're focusing on diagnosing these needs in the entire department, so we have lots of data. In this study, in this diagnosis of plurilingualism in Antioquia, as I told you before, we're trying to identify needs in terms of language education, language teacher development, translation, interpretation, and other linguistic services. And also, as part of the study, we're trying to identify what languages are preferred or what languages are needed in the different subregions of Antioquia. I'm using here a map of the Department of Antioquia that depicts all the different subregions. There are 9 subregions in Antioquia. Our main campus is located in the area metropolitana. That's the red area right in the middle of the map. And of course, what we are also expecting with the identification of these needs is to identify strategic alliances to develop plurilingualism projects and propose courses of action. to the government or to any of those strategic allies. In the School of Languages, we are doing so also with the hope of fostering an idea that counteracts the bilingual English-Spanish agenda that predominates in Colombia. Now, as part of this diagnosis, we have different kinds of quantitative and qualitative data. We started with the document analysis. We analyzed documents just released from our Institute of Regional Studies at the university that analyzed the needs. They undertook this study for the past 3 years, and they identified the needs, the general needs of every one of those regions, except for Área Metropolitana. We also analyzed about 97% of our Antioquia's municipalities' development plans, where we found that most of them, the larger municipalities, the larger towns, as well as some of the smaller towns, have bilingual projects as part of those government plans. We also applied a questionnaire to actors that we identified thanks to our Dirección de Regionalización, which is the office within the university that has a relation with all the different subregions, the different campuses in all the subregions. And those actors belong or identify with any of these sectors: educational, productive, governmental, or what we called civil society. We also, towards the end of last year, conducted individual and group interviews, a total of 19 interviews with key stakeholders from those 4 different sectors. In the second study that, this is actually like the main point of this presentation, we focused on L2Us at Universidad de Antioquia among undergraduate students. As you can see here, I have a map of Antioquia depicting the presence of Universidad de Antioquia in all the different subregions of the department. Because we have information from students from all over the department. You can see here that the different campuses are identified in terms of the city where they are located. In terms of language use, we identified what languages our students use, for what purposes, in what situations or contexts. And also in terms of L2 learning investment, or in general learning investment of languages, what kind of investments they do and what are their expected returns, if those expected returns are material or symbolic. Within this study, we are using the framework developed originally by Norton during the 1990s and later by Darwin and Norton in 2015, where they further developed the concept of identity in language learning and paying special attention to or going beyond the idea of motivation for language learning, but the idea of investment in language learning, the kinds of investments in terms of time, effort, etc., that learners do when they are learning a language. So in this project, in the literature, we find, especially internationally, we find many different efforts focusing on language learner identity. This in general in the world, internationally. But generally, these studies are ethnographic studies, qualitative studies. And this study is quantitative because as a director and with my fellow researcher, Diana Quinchia, I know she's already here, She is the general coordinator of our foreign language institutional program. So we wanted to have the big picture of language learner identity, the languages that predominate, that are used in our students' real lives. And of course, we have access, because of our current positions, we have access to information about these learners in terms of demographics. And we wanted to be able to identify characteristics of those identities in terms of cultural capital, social capital, these being part of Darwin and Norton's framework, social class, ethnicity, sex, and also their academic programs. For this research, this is the data that we have. So we started by identifying within the information systems in our institution what information was available about these students, about these about 39,000 students. So we have the information that they enter through questionnaire when they register for admissions, the entrance exam. We have their academic information through in our systems that are called Mares and Reúne, a self-evaluation test that they take when they register when they register for the entrance exam. We have admission data. We also have this very special information. This is the library material circulation statistics. There we are able to find the kinds of materials that they borrow in other languages. And of course, we know from what academic units these students are. We also have senior students questionnaire. This is a questionnaire that they take when they are about to graduate. We have national standardized test results. Of course, we're using this with all the ethics, the research ethics that should be. And we've had great support from the administration at the university, even our university president, who was a mediator when we were trying to retrieve the results from the national standardized tests.
Paula, sorry to interrupt, just to remind you that you have 8 minutes left, right?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We also conducted a survey. It was with this survey that we applied to all students, to all undergraduate students in the university. We actually got almost 1,800 results, 1,800 answers from students from all the different academic units. And there we inquired about their L2 use, their purposes for L2 learning, and their L2 learning investment. It was a very complex questionnaire. It took us months to get to finally what we sent. And it was complex. We used an application that our engineers at the university have developed for questionnaires. And they ask about the language use and the language and then the learning investment for every one of the languages that they selected. So if students speak one language and one L2, but they are learning a third one, then they provided answers for every one of those languages. And therefore, we were able to establish like a characterization of how many languages they are learning in general, our students, and in general, characterizing from what academic units they come from. So here, because I have very little time, so this is the background for all the two studies. And of course, I'm here, I'm bringing up topics that I have identified when reading the data from the two studies. First, of course, this doesn't surprise, English is the L2 dominant language. But not only the dominant language, this is a generation of students where the number of students who see it as an imposition has decreased. Now, I would dare to say that the status of English in comparison to all the other foreign languages that our students are exposed to is more of a lingua franca than a foreign language. They use it in their everyday lives. And of course, we see this also reflected at the departmental level. I mean, in our department, Antioquia, we see that English is the dominant L2. And this, of course, happens, for example, in small towns like Segovia, not necessarily because they need to interact or they need it for academic life, but because it comes with the national policies. And the mayors within those small towns, the small towns in our department, they, of course, want their students to do better at national standardized tests. But we also see within the plans, the development plans that we analyzed within the study, the diagnosis of Antioquia's needs in terms of plurilingualism, that there are efforts and intentions for internationalization. And at some point they are for economic growth, but there are also these international alliances for peace building projects. So we have a lot, there is, on the one side, we see investment, international investment, but on the other side, international cooperation for peace projects. Now, at the individual level, we see, and this is very recurrent, that students like to learn or they use another language for personal satisfaction, or for communicating with the English-speaking community, and also to have access to information. Also for academic purposes, and also for entertainment. Now, another theme that I see emerging up to now is that, as I told you earlier, there are several bilingualism projects either projected or taking place in different towns in Antioquia. But mostly they focus on schools, even though that there is an intention of several mayors that the community speaks English because of the increasing tourism taking place in Antioquia, especially after signing the peace agreements. And this, of course, we see that there is a direct relationship with wanting to do better in the national standardized tests. But still, because these bilingualism projects focus very much on schools, public schools, we see a great need, an increasing need to develop English projects that focus on tourism. But that focus on tourism, and what we are trying to do is that they focus on tourism that respects the territory. Now, I want to move faster onto these other themes. Another theme that I found is that L2 needs in terms of other languages of communication, because within the study, we are characterizing languages as either lingua franca, languages for communication, and languages of identity like heritage languages. Now, these needs vary in terms of the territory vocation, that is the different developments within the region. So we see that other languages of choice, other foreign languages that are of choice include French, Portuguese, Chinese, and German within the department. We see, for example, an incremental need of Chinese, particularly in specific regions like Urabá. Also because of the building of new highways. With the building of new highways, Chinese companies are bringing in their own crew, and they don't speak English, they don't speak Spanish. So we have an increasing immigrant population, or better, sojourner population, because they come here for specific projects. Now, we cannot generalize, for example, that French is needed in all Antioquia, but in specific regions, for example, area metropolitana, and Chinese in regions like Urabá. Now, when we see the preferences of students within the University of Antioquia, those learning needs or those language preferences do not necessarily correspond to the needs in the territory or their profession. The languages of choice in terms of recurrence are French, German, Portuguese, Italian, Japanese, Korean also, which we don't offer within our multilingual program. And finally, Chinese. Now, it has been interesting to see how these preferences differ from academic unit to another. So we see, for example, that in the School of Law, there is a higher preference for French than for English. In the Institute of Physical Education, German is predominant. In the School of Languages, English is far more preferred or used than French. And it is like this in all the, and for example, in the School of Education, language preference is a lot more diverse, you know, with different languages, and one of those being Portuguese. And some of that has to do with academic developments within the specific disciplines. For example, in law, there is a lot of the literature because of the tradition in France in law that also has an impact in the curriculum. Whereas, for example, in the Institute of Physical Education, there are several teacher researchers who have agreements, cooperation agreements with German universities. And that also, that agreement, that relationship of partnership has an effect on language selection among students. Even though there is growing interest of the importance of, or growing awareness of the importance of preserving our linguistic heritage, there are no specific projects in the municipality's development plans to do so. You see that that they care, but then the projects, there are no projects. There are bilingual projects with English, but not necessarily with heritage languages. Now, at the University of Antioquia, students learning heritage languages or wanting to learn them report a desire to preserve cultural heritage or integrate to the communities of native speakers. Now, translation is pretty much invisible. And we see also that present within Universidad de Antioquia. That's because public attention mostly focuses on language learning projects in spite of local and regional intentions for internationalization. Now, there are three concluding remarks to close this quick presentation. Now, as a director and also as a teacher within the School of Languages, I see the importance of the role of this school in maintaining a plurilingual, multicultural, and intercultural, especially, agenda within the university and in the region. And that requires a pedagogy of plurilingualism in our conversations with different actors and stakeholders. Consolidating alliances with key stakeholders in Antioquia's regions is crucial to develop this agenda. The university cannot do it alone, or the School of Languages cannot do it alone. We have to establish alliances with companies within every subregion and with the government, the local governments. Curriculum, project, and program design should keep in mind the diverse needs of particular contexts within the region and student identities. We are now at a particular point where we are trying to, in the data analysis, where we want to establish a a relationship between, for example, social class and language preference, and see if there is an effect, if there is a relationship there, or if English has a lingua franca status in other subregions in Antioquia, as it probably does here in the metropolitan area. I want to stop there. Thank you for your attention, and I'm sorry for taking a few more minutes.
Okay, thank you, Paula, for that interesting presentation on it's the panorama at UDEA and in the region so far. We have one question here. Maybe we're going to have just 5 minutes of questions, maybe space for just one. And the question is, what are the challenges that you have faced in conducting this study? I mean, you've been in contact with people from different walks of life, from the government and all that, all the kinds of participants you included in the study, but what have been the main challenges in terms of the audiences or the research process in general?
Well, I thought it was going to be even more complicated. I mean, I thought that that data collection was going to take beyond 1 year, and it hasn't. And I think that's because we've been very steady in our work within the two different groups. With the first one, with the diagnosis of plurilingualism needs in Antioquia, the challenge has probably been, of course, because of the pandemic. Well, that's number one, and I'm going to tell you why. But first, the fact that we have a large group, but I've had the collaboration of my teammates, and especially our professional for regionalización, who is Christian, and he has helped me a lot in organizing the logistics with such a large team for discussing and making decisions within the team. But with data collection within the, not in area metropolitana, but for all the other regions, it is preferable to have a face-to-face interaction, conversing with the communities in those regions. And then we had the pandemic, and we have been able to have the interviews via Zoom or via Meet. But then one of the things that I've had to face also, in addition to not being able to interview people face to face, is, well, first, it took time for them to accept having an interview like this. At least with some, we got responses from some people, but we wanted to have more. We wanted to have more answers from all the different regions. We got fewer answers from Magdalena Medio and Occidente and Suroeste, where we know there are many bilingualism projects going on that we wanted to explore. In Suroeste, there is a large indigenous community, and unfortunately, even though the development plans are very rich in information, we would have liked to reach a larger audience for data collection. Now within Universidad de Antioquia, it has been great. We've had a lot of support in retrieving the information from the student population. So we haven't had a larger challenge than constructing the questionnaire. That was a great challenge.
Okay, we have one more question here from the audience. Are these other languages as English needed for academic, economic, and business interests? Are these other interests artistic, for pleasure? How could these different interests influence students' identities and language learning? So it's like the person sent several questions in a row.
Yeah, we are just, thank you, Ivan, for the question. One of the things that we've seen is that English is not necessarily immediately related to academic purposes. Very often it is related to communication and establishing relationships, even romantic relationships, playing video games, communicating with people who are not native speakers of English. So there's already that recognition. But with all the other languages, I am right now analyzing the comments, the descriptive comments from students saying whatever they wanted to say about languages. And it is really inspiring to see the comments that they make. They say that languages open doors. They get them closer to the to other worldviews. And then I see a great interest in integrating with the cultures that speak that language. With French, for example, we see a recurrence of students wanting to learn it just out of pleasure, but also because in specific schools within the university, like the School of Engineering, they have double major, yes, double majoring. Adriana was our international affairs.
Degree.
What's the word?
Double degree.
Double degree, thank you. A double degree with France, with French universities. So there is a particular interest in getting that double degree in those schools. So as I said in the presentation, the efforts within the academic unit have an impact on language choice.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a predominance. Students do not necessarily take into account the predominance of the language use within their professions.
Okay. Paula, thank you so much for sharing again your insights with all of us. And we'll have more questions at the end when we have this conversation with the researchers. So thank you so much for your time, for your kindness to be here with us. And we will talk later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now I'll leave you with Adriana, who is going to introduce Dr. Amparo Clavijo.
Okay. Good morning again to all of you, and thank you for staying with us. As Janet said at the beginning, it is an honor to have you all here and to promote this dialogue from our master's programs with colleagues from other universities in the city, in Colombia, and of course, in the world. It is my pleasure and my honor to introduce Dr. Amparo Clavijo Larte. So we could be talking about her CV for many minutes as with the other presenters, but I just want to say briefly that she is a professor at Universidad Francisco José de Caldas. She teaches in the areas of literacy and qualitative research in the master's program in applied linguistics and also in the undergraduate program. She holds a PhD in education from the University of Arizona and a master's degree in TESOL and studies in comparative literature from Arizona State University. She has done a lot of research in various areas such as teacher education and linguistic landscaping and multilingualism and many other fields. Her most recent book is called Pedagogías de la Comunidad a través de investigaciones locales en el contexto urbano de Bogotá, and published through the Universidad Distrital Publishing Fund. But she has also done a very interesting work leading the consolidation of the masters at Universidad Distrital, the master's degree in English teaching, and also the famous Colombian Applied Linguistics Journal. So I'm very pleased as I have had this friendship with Amparo for many years, and she has been one of the interesting colleagues with whom we have conversations and appear for many academic purposes. So please, let's welcome Dr. Amparo Clavijo.
Can you see me? Hello. Thank you, Adriana, for this nice introduction. I don't really see the screen here, but I'm going to share my screen so that I can share with you this presentation. But before that, I'd like to thank Universidad de Antioquia, Jeanette, the coordinator of the master's program at Universidad de Antioquia, for this invitation and this opportunity to share with you research that is our passion. I'm also talking on behalf of my research group, Lectoescrinautas, with whom we have embarked in this wonderful experience of doing research in the city of Bogota. Our research project is 21 years old, and we have, can you see the screen? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, yes, we can.
All right, thank you. So we have been doing research for 21 years on the research area of literacies, which is my area of expertise and teacher education. And during the last maybe 13 years, since 2009, we have been focused on linguistic landscaping and literacies, community literacies, as important resources that teachers can use in the classroom. So we have basically been working with teachers from different localities in Bogota. Bogota is a city of more than 8 million people, and we have been working with teachers from 5 different localities, basically in the southeast and in the southwest and now in the downtown area in the historic center. So this presentation is titled Crossing Multilingual Boundaries with Powerful Literacies in the Linguistic and Socioeconomic Landscape of La Candelaria. And now I will introduce my research group. Sorry. The research group for this project that is started in 2019 has a wonderful group of students, which is one of the differences with the other projects. It's funded by Centro de Investigación y Desarrollo Científico from Universidad Distrital, Francisco José de Caldas. And I have had the wonderful experience of working with undergraduate and graduate students as co-researchers. We have 3 graduate students, Daniel Calderón Aponte, Alejandra Rodriguez, and Julia Andrea Nieto, who have already graduated. Alejandra is a candidate. She's about to do her oral defense with a very interesting project on linguistic landscaping and sociocultural landscaping at a public university. Kevin Arley Prieto, Maria Clara Nader, and Juan Camilo Rodriguez are undergraduate students who also carried out research as part of this big research project funded by the university. And we had 2 research assistants, one at a different semester, Fabio Martinez and Jessica Barragan, whose projects also were related to the languages and literacies in Bogota. The team is also collaborative with collaborations from outside Bogota, from Dr. Yuri Sharkey from University of New Hampshire, and Dr. Teresa Austin from UMass Amherst, and my dear colleague Maribel Ramirez Galindo, with whom I co-authored the book that Dr. Gonzalez mentioned. So together we have been experiencing with a lot of passion this project, especially because we started before the pandemic hit the planet. And then we also, during the pandemic, we had to manage ways to collect data and write the thesis for the undergraduate and graduate students and be able to collect data, do analysis, everything through the support of technologies. So the students' research projects are joint research projects that have actually enlightened the major research project that we have called Literacies, Cultures, and Pedagogy in Bogota. And it's we have been working on it. It's still in progress. We are doing analysis. And this is the 3rd year of the project. So I'd like to share with you a little bit of the geographical place where this project is. This is kind of the 9th project that I've been developing at the university during the time that I've been a researcher in the master's program in applied linguistics. So we picked La Candelaria and Bogota, the historic center, because in one of my classes, in the seminar on literacy, critical literacies, we were reading about linguistic landscaping from Elena Shohami and Gorter, from Raul Mora and his research group, from these wonderful research projects that have been that have had publications and that are really helping us understand how is it that the literacies of our own places, of our own cities, are important insights and important resources for teaching the language, the foreign language that we teach, whether it is English or French or whatever language. I think we believe that languages are resources and literacies beyond languages, as Elena Shohami was mentioning. The semiotic part of the city is very, very important. So we are focused on the smallest locality, that is La Candelaria. It's the smallest one because it only has 8 barrios, and it's very much in the historic center. So maybe some of you or many of you have visited downtown Bogota and have seen Chorro de Quevedo and the museums, Botero Museum, the universities, all the churches, Plaza de Bolívar, etc. So those are the places that we walked and documented the kind of literacies in that geographical place. So as I said, for the last 13 years, we have been concerned about the ways that we taught and we were taught to teach English as a foreign language. And necessarily in those times that we were taught, and maybe now we have observed some traditional ways of teaching English just focus on the language and not connecting with the life and the realities of the students. So we see that who we are and what we know and what we do and where we live is totally another topic that cannot enter the classroom. So our pedagogy and our beliefs as teacher researchers is that we need to establish a connection between the school curricula and the life and realities of students and their funds of knowledge. Because we don't value those resources, we observe deficit discourses that do not permit teachers to value students' background knowledge and languages and ethnicities and literacies as sources for learning. Because as you may know, we do have Venezuelan students all over the country. We have Caribbean students, we have indigenous students in schools and at the university. In our university, we have a good number of indigenous students and languages. And we also have Ecuadorian students and even students from the United States, from parents who have moved to Colombia and are attending schools in downtown Bogota. We are also concerned about equity issues because they ignore the diverse backgrounds of the students, seem to be problematic. So we are addressing in this study those problems, and we have posed 3 research questions for whom we have some emerging themes that I will show in a little bit that I will share with you. So the first question is, what urban, social, cultural, linguistic, and literacy practices exist in La Candelaria? What means of expression are present among individuals and collectives that share urban languages and literacy practices in La Candelaria? And what are the implications of developing place awareness among students in a public school in La Candelaria through a community-based pedagogy that recognizes La Candelaria as a multicultural place? So we're actually working with teachers from 2 public schools, one in La Candelaria and the other in Santa Fe, which is the next to the north, the next neighborhood. So we were working with 2 groups of teachers. And we are using as our theoretical framework 3 main or major concepts that help us support our study and support what we believe. The first one is community-based teacher education that implies having a university school partnership. We strongly believe that it's very important to actually see the reality of the schools and teachers to be able to do teacher education in the master's and in the undergraduate program. We also see, as Cochrane-Smith 2004 stated, that the students with the greatest academic needs that regularly are in public schools are least likely to have access to educational opportunities that are congruent with their life experiences. So, and from Seigner and Guillen, we also see, and Lopez and the other authors that I have cited there, we see that they are very much interested in looking at the community to be able to connect with the kind of school curricula that is offered, because through all the disciplines, through all the curriculum content areas, it is very important to establish connections with the outside world of the classroom. The second concept is critical literacy and critical pedagogies. From Mario Lopez Gopar, he considers that teaching English critically implies welcoming indigenous children's languages into the classroom and developing identity text in class activities in his study that he carried out in Oaxaca with indigenous languages as heritage languages that need to be maintained and preserved. And finally, a concept that is of big importance and has been also presented by the previous presenters, Elena Shohami and Paula Echeverri, linguistic landscape and city literacies, which definitely connect to the pedagogical power of urban spaces, as important to explore the realities of out-of-school practices and the uses of English or other languages, as you will see in the data that we have collected.
I'm
yes?
sorry, I remind you, you have 10 minutes left.
Thank you. So we have used critical collaborative ethnography because we believe that it's important to challenge this bottom-up perspective over top-down perspective to develop procedures for knowledge building. And we want to follow false board of participation of multiple actors that requires an equal status of the researcher and the research through participatory methodology. So we have learned to create and construct knowledge collaboratively with the different actors and the different researchers. So the methodology is ethnography of place. We have used Sarah Pink. She defines the methodology as walking as an ethnographic method. So it's ethnography of place, but we also see ethnography of taste because it implies sensory and embodied experiences of tasting the places and the food in La Candelaria, as you may see in the picture. We used different data collection instruments. We did different teacher workshops during 2019 with the teachers from La Candelaria and Santa Fe. We interviewed the teachers. We created a corpus of photographs with 387 photos. We did interviews with graffiti artists, also as actors of downtown La Candelaria neighborhoods. We interviewed university students in La Candelaria because 2 of our undergraduate students were interested in looking at the academic literacies, and we interviewed a resident of La Candelaria as well. So we all collected this information, and now I'd like to share some of the pictures so that you have an idea of the linguistic landscape of La Candelaria. Let's see. Let me go to. So this is what we found. Can you see the pictures now?
No, we cannot.
You cannot see them. Okay, let me try again. I need to do stop sharing. Stop sharing. Then share screen. Okay, can you see the pictures now? The photos?
Yes, we can see them now.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to share quickly some of the photos. This is a menu. I think this is Hebrew in one of the restaurants in La Candelaria. This is downtown. This is Santa Fe. We have murals that depict really the diversity that we have. We have languages also within the murals that show that English is the most important language. We have very interesting murals that call for the kind of messages that need to be presented to the city and the citizens. We have ethnic murals of indigenous. We have this call for collaboration and cooperation for money in the temple. And we also have messages for Venezuelans about the kind of health issues that they're invited that Colombian government is offering. We have German Institute, Language Institute. We have these services also offer. We have all of this in the linguistic landscape. There's a lot of hostels, so these owners want to make sure that they are not going to bring their, because their house is not a hostel. And so we have different languages in downtown Bogota that oftentimes we are not considering to include in our language school curriculum. This is a parking from Biblioteca Luis Ángel Arango that it's inviting to park and read. This is a sign of bienvenidos to La Casa de la Democracia, but it's not really letting people go. I included this because it uses a sign from a regional sign, La Cocina de sus Mercedes, which is very much used in Bogota, but also in Boyacá. There's a beautiful ethnic mural that we use to analyze the kind of expression and the visibility or invisibility that that indigenous have in our country. So I'm going to stop sharing to go back to the presentation. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Can you see it? All right, thank you. So we did walk the La Candelaria several times, and we were building this understanding of the multi-layer nature place through multicultural, multilingual resources of La Candelaria. Okay. So some preliminary themes or categories that we see in the linguistic landscape. As you see here on the two sides, we have 3 pictures of graffiti. We have also a message of stop murdering social leaders on a window of one of the buildings. And we also have an ethnic graffiti. And we see that the city offers multiple literacies, such as graffiti, murals, stencil, billboards, flyers, touristic and historical information that require to have critical perspectives to value the social, linguistic, political dimensions of the community resources. There are some issues that call our attention, which were documented through the interviews and the pictures we had, the interviews with people, and it's gentrification. Gentrification or displacement suffered by the residents of La Candelaria. In the interview with the resident of La Candelaria, she was telling us that there are very few Candelarios in the schools, and there are few Candelarios living in La Candelaria because they sold their houses, and there were these hostels and hotels and other kind of economic restaurants, the other kind of economic places that replace the houses in La Candelaria. So there are socioeconomic struggles of school children and parents as workers. Children come from Usme, from very far away barrios in the south, very south of Bogota, because their parents work downtown. So that's the best school that fits their needs. And so they come there and then they stay the whole day to work with their parents. We saw many Venezuelan immigrants in downtown Bogota selling those bolivares and artists and handcrafts. And we also saw the invisibility of indigenous populations. So urban renovation, gentrification, and multilingualism seems to be like a continuum. So we posed these questions in regards to multilingualism. How can multilingualism be leveraged for those whose lives are impacted by gentrification and urban renovation? Who has access to this multilingualism? What purposes does it serve? How can multilingualism help address the social inequities that persist and currently exist? So now that I listened to Elena Shohami with a more inclusive perspective, we are thinking about multilingualism and gentrification rather as exclusive or inclusive perspective in our context of study. For the second question, we're looking at the means of expression of individuals and collectives. We were looking at how these social dynamics of individuals and collectives and their subjectivities are expressed through multimodal, multicultural, and multilingual urban languages in the historic center. You can see the 3 pictures. In one, we are the artist is really going against the system. And in the second one, the person is selling, in this local culture, selling mobile minutes. It's also selling all kinds of goods and food and packages for the residents and the passersby in La Candelaria. And also they're offering our good coffee in grain and ground. So I want to bring some of the voices of the artists in regards to what they do and how they belong to La Candelaria. And I'm going to read about maybe 1 or 2 of these vignettes. Cigarra says, I dedicate myself more to muralism and therefore to paste posters. The murals were something communal, planned with the people. The city and the street are developing in the most organic way and the most natural way, and so the people who intervene in it. Polígrafo says the city is like this, it is organic. art is not permanent. Time passes and it becomes cover. Another piece is proposed. And finally, Ultra, who was the only woman artist we interviewed, she said, if graffiti is a consequence of understanding the city as a very light surface, it is very interesting to reimagine spaces with respect to color, textures, and everything. So it's important for us as language teachers to actually consider these other languages beyond the words, as Shohami was saying, to actually be part of the reading and writing of the city and the city places and the understanding of the city places as resources that also are part of our identity. One piece from university students that were recorded in what they thought of the city. One of the students says, looking at the posters, most of them are papers that are pasted with messages that may be insulting to a political class that has been ingrained for a long time. Funny too, and I think it includes much more history and that culture of political violence that has given in our country. I'm gonna move faster because I think I'm running out of time. This is the last emerging theme from the last question, implications of place awareness for students and teachers. We observe and learn that schools in downtown Bogota have a fluid and diverse student population. As I said, we have indigenous students, Ecuadorian, Venezuelans, and Caribbean students. And I think it requires learning and including the realities of their community as pedagogical resources for learning, exploring how students relate with urban spaces and teachers using local city literacies in the curriculum. Some of the teacher voices, I'm just gonna read one from Pedro Alvarez. He said, the idea is to create in boys from 6 to 11 the appropriation of their territory and to see what kind of tourism can and should be an alternative for their lives. These are some evidences of how teachers invited students to actually explore through an environmental tour and recognize the resources very close to La Candelaria. Edith, who was a teacher from Policarpa School, said, we have done an environmental tour in recognition of the water resource we have here, and it was all over the environmental axis, taking 13th Avenue, reaching out to Quinta de Bolivar, where we can see a small waterfall of San Francisco River. That was in August last year. The year before, that was 2019. And also the kind of writing that occurred after these kind of visits, interesting visit for students. We went to the Mirador de los Nevados Park, to the see the Parque de los Nevados in the Central Mountain Range. After we come from the Mirador de los Nevados, the agreement is to write what you like best. That was the same teacher I did. And one of the students said, I love the Mirador de los Nevados Park because it was very beautiful. There were birds, trees, stories, and I like the obelisks. Finally, the implications that we consider at 3 levels for teacher education, for research practices, and for linguistic policies. In our collaborative analysis and our collaborative reflections that we do every week with the research group, we believe that this is an enriching process of learning for new researchers and teacher educators, and that the universities should provide these spaces and fund these research projects with participation of many of the students so that they have this opportunity to actually collect data, think together, construct ideas together. Yesterday, we were discussing about the importance of these urban literacy studies in applied linguistics as a major area also that needs to be looked at to be considered as part of the teacher education programs as well. We definitely are convinced that demystifying the role of the researcher and the research is part of what we had as collaborative ethnography. And I think it's important to break those top-down perspectives and have more horizontal relationships with those we are learning from. Also, collaborative production of knowledge became an important academic activity, as you will see in the publications that we've had together with the graduate and undergraduate students. And finally, we believe that it's important to think about whose language and ethnic backgrounds are visible on the streets of Bogota. Why are we having some languages more visible and with more status than others? As I said, this is a short list of publications that the research group has been working on. We're working on a chapter recently on the city's curriculum, opportunity for learning about literacies, ethnography, and pedagogy of place. Dr. Austin and I worked on a chapter that is hopefully coming up sometime this year, Crossing Multilingual Boundaries with Powerful Literacies, a collaborative ethnography in the linguistic and socio-economic landscape of downtown Bogota, in a book by de Mejia, Miranda, and Valencia, Critical Perspective and Voices from the Film Multilingual Colombia, and an article, a research article that came out last year in December by Julie Nieto and I, Situating Local Literacy at the Core of ELT Curriculum in Higher Education. So this is what I had to share with you today, and if there are any questions, I will be very happy to address. Thank you very much again for this time to share with you these experiences.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Clavijo. It's a very interesting study, and it raises awareness about various things we don't even know that happen, especially the multilingual situation in Bogota. I mean, I assume Elena would be surprised too to see signs in Hebrew in Bogota and in other languages. Right. That's very interesting. Okay, we have a question. Unfortunately, we will not have time to address everything that people are saying, but maybe when we have the conversation later. So one of the questions we received has to do with your insights about the gains in terms of English learning that high school students experienced after participating in this approach, and the teachers' gains, the in-service teachers, about new ways to teach English. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's a very interesting question. I think that there are many gains because this project bridges the curriculum at the master's program and the research processes that we do. So this is part, again, as I think I mentioned at the beginning, part of a seminar that I teach in the graduate program. And out of the seminar, all of these experiences of mapping, I didn't talk very much about mapping the city and mapping the linguistic landscape. And through that exercise, my students who are in-service teachers actually discover so many things from these well-known places like their barrios or the places where they teach. And because they go out to the places to observe differently with a different lens, what kind of linguistic information is there that they haven't seen, and what kind, and also from a semiotic perspective, what beyond language is there that can be addressed in the English curriculum or in the chemistry curriculum, because we have also worked, as it is in the book in Spanish, we have also worked with chemistry teachers, we work with physical education teachers, we work with social studies teachers, with principals, and they have been able to see the importance of bridging these realities. So we do see a lot of gains for teachers to actually broaden their understanding of language and moving away of what it's only part of maybe a textbook as the only source. Students have been able to also use what they see, what they have. We have worked more with teachers, but through the teachers, they have told us that they have opened in the class and they have been able to tell stories. And I don't remember exactly who was the teacher who talked about this. Maybe it was Judy Sharkey, this indigenous student. I think it was in your master's program that was very shy. One of the students of the master program was talking about one of her students. And then when they did the mapping, because the students also do the mapping and then report to the class, they were suddenly the language and the ethnicity and the experiences became so central. So the students really have this revealing moment and opportunity to actually talk about their identity, talk about their language and their experiences as important for the language class.
I am extremely sorry to cut this discussion.
That's fine.
Because we have a very tight schedule. So we want to thank you for your insights. There are other questions that we will address later. And we invite all our people that are following us through YouTube and through Zoom to have a 10-minute break. And thank you for staying
Thank
with
you,
us.
Adriana. Thanks so much for this wonderful opportunity. See you later. Bye.
Thank you for Professor Clavijo, and again, an honor to have you here today. And thank you for sharing that enlightening study. Very, very interesting and very inspiring for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Okay, so we'll see each other again in 10 minutes for a short coffee break to continue with Dr. Isabel Tejada's presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anna, I think we can continue now.
I was just checking that Isabel was connected, and I hope she is. Isabel, are you connected already? And she's sending me a, wait a minute, she's sending me an.
Okay, because I don't see her in the chat. No, not yet.
Yeah, she's there already.
Okay, she's there. Okay.
Isabel. Dice que la tienen inhabilitada. Para que por favor la habilite el chico Eric, ¿cómo era que se llamaba? La que nos está apoyando.
Carlos o Karen pueden darle entrada a Isabel Tejada.
Isabel Tejada. Ella aparece ahí, pero ella dice.
She needs permission to enter the chat room. Okay.
Ya.
Okay, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for still being here with us after all these hours. We're sure you're tired, but okay, let's see. We can do our best for the rest of the morning. So let me introduce you to, or let me introduce Dr. Isabel Tejada. She has a PhD. Well, wait a minute. I'm a little bit, yeah. So Isabel Tejada is an assistant professor at the School of Education at Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá. Her research interests include second language acquisition in instructional settings, interculturality, and growth mindset in education. Again, like Professor Paula Echeverri, she was very shy on putting information in her bio, but I'm pretty sure you know her, you have read her publications and are aware of a research that she has conducted so far on language policies and other areas of interest. So I'm going to leave you with her. Thank you so much, Isabel, for being with us here, for accepting our invitation and sharing your insights with us. So back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ana Maria, so very much. I'm really excited and nervous, of course, to be sharing this incredible panel with you all. So I just have a disclaimer before I begin. My talk is not going to be entirely focused on multilingualism or plurilingualism. There is a very important component on this in my in the research that I'm going to present. So I just want you to take that into account. Okay, so let me share. Here it is. All right. Let me just show. Yeah. There we are. Okay. So I hope you can see it there. Can you confirm?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So the title of my talk is Beyond Folklore, reflecting upon the implementation of a MOOC on interculturality at the university level. So I just wanted to, again, not introduce myself, but also introduce the research group that I'm representing. The logo is the right bottom of the screen, Educación para el Bilingüismo y el Multilingüismo. And I'm really glad Professor Amparo Clavijo also talked about her research group, because to me, this is part of what makes our work really significant, is that we can do this as a team, right? And co-create this, incredible initiatives and strategies, and also be able to collaborate eventually with you, which is also the purpose of this event. So I want you to pay attention to, I just didn't want to be like very aesthetic in my presentation. I want those tiles that you see on the left to have a purpose. So we're going to reflect on these styles at the end of the talk. So pay attention to them. So try to focus on the colors, on patterns, etc. Okay, I'm just giving you a hint. All right, so I'm going to divide this talk in 3 parts. So the conceptual lenses that I am going to refer to, concerning, of course, interculturality, the articulation of the course that I mentioned, and also some of the reflections or concluding remarks. Basically, what we found with my colleagues, and also as Dr. Amparo Clavijo mentioned, this is part of a chapter I wrote with my colleague Anne-Marie Trascott de Mejia for this book, Multilingual Colombia. So I'm going to focus on the phenomenology of the self and the pedagogical possibilities that derive from this inquiry. Okay, so let me just begin with this idea of interculturality that you probably know and maybe are already like tired of hearing about. So I just wanted to situate the debate, right? We usually think of interculturality as folklore marking. So we think of the festivities or the celebrations that certain cultures have. So it's very much tied to this idea of culture as one thing, right? It is also a nation-bounded characteristic, yeah? So we think of like interculturality as the ability to relate to someone from another country. And also we might tend to think of interculturality as the tolerance paradox. And if you may know about this, this is a paradox in the philosophy discipline, which says that if you develop this capacity to respect everyone and respect every action, you may also be tolerating actions that are damaging to the human integrity. So this is important to consider because these are three ways that interculturality has been addressed actually in language curricula and in education in general. So this is where I want to situate the problem, right? So I'm going to focus on a couple of notions. One of them is based on my colleagues, the colleagues I work with at Sorbonne Nouvelle Paris 3, the university in France. One of them is Gamboa Diaz's notion on intercultural dimensions. That's why it's in the title. And something that I really like about this theoretical reflection that she brings to the floor is that interculturality has been defined and addressed in so many ways. So dimensions is one encompassing term to refer to all of these things that respond to a wide range of critical epistemological, methodological, pedagogical, and societal concerns, which are chosen and studied according to one's interests or needs. So you can find there is interculturality for business management, for communicative competence, for sociology purposes, etc. So there is a lot of things going on there. So we want to kind of narrow this down a little bit. And in our understanding in my group, with my co-creation with my colleagues, we kind of started to understand interculturality as the contemplation and understanding of the other, that is the otherness, right? And I know this is part of what interculturality for my colleagues here who are present now is also part of the case. So it's not just the other, but also of myself as another, which is something that the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur said, that I cannot even begin to understand what the other represents to me if I don't know who I am, right? So this is a self-awareness or self-knowledge endeavor, okay? And I wanted to bring this idea of what the work of Marina Abramovich, the artist is present, is about, which is looking at the other and analyzing the other in order to also analyze and understand myself. All right, so with my colleagues, we came up with this definition, which I like to use as my operationalized way of interculturality. And we decided to understand it as the ability to explore, analyze, similarities, differences, or unexpected elements of another culture, be it an individual idioculture or develop strategies, individual or collective, I think something there I caught, or develop strategies of situational, communicational, relational adjustment. And it is about adopting a critical interactive perspective of understanding and associating diversity with known and unknown people in current and unexpected situations, as well as in multiple contexts. This definition, which I know is rather complex and intends not to be very much, addressing all the possible scenarios. What I really like about it is that we tend to overlook that interculturality, it starts with my own understanding of myself, and then the person right next to me, which might be my family. And we directly think of someone who is very far away from us, the foreigner, right? So this definition kind of like brings us back to the core of what we need to do before we address that which is outside me, basically. All right, so in this search of the understanding of the notions, I adhered personally a lot to Catherine Walsh's distinctions of interculturality. And as you know, so she brings this 3 ways of carrying out an intercultural endeavor. So the relational, which is the nation-bounded folklore marking notion, the functional, which is kind of like the UNESCO, UN, and all these organizations kind of interculturality, which kind of has the risk of the tolerance paradox. And there is a huge emphasis on difference and stereotype driven marking. So we want to take distance from these 2 notions and embrace the critical perspective, or the critical notion where the hegemonic power structures are questioned. And we realize that there are cultures that are upon others that are better than others in some scenarios, or most scenarios. And as you already know, these cultures are the ones that have this colonial history behind. So that is the idea. So we start questioning those hegemonic structures and start to embrace the recognition of the self as part of the diversity. Okay. So, so this is like what constitutes for me and for my colleagues who developed this project that I'm going to present in a minute, interculturality. Then I'm going to move on to identity and hybridity, which are also core concepts for us. So we understand hybridity as either a compound or substance of many elements that are tangible as our biological organisms. So our identity is composed by our bodies, right? So this is like a very important notion if we want to understand hegemonic structures and the biopower that Foucault referred to, right? So our bodies are important in the composition or configuration of our identity, and also intangible components such as our souls, our spirit, right? So we want to like embrace the whole configuration. And also something that I personally really like to add to this concept is the notion of impermanence or temporary of the Buddhist, philosophy, which is that our identities are not fixed. We change all the time. And this is something that is rarely addressed in our language and education, teacher education courses. Finally, identity for us, or for me, is an intersectional, hybrid, and an intersubjective endeavor. So this idea of a permanent, reconstruction, reconfiguration, questioning is what I'm going to later be referring to as the phenomenological understanding of the self. Okay.
Isabel.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Just to remind you about the time, you have 10 minutes left.
Okay. Right? Perfect. Thank you. All right. So, okay. So I'm going to move forward. So the second part of identity that I also want to bring forth is that we also like this analogy with fractals that Abdallah Pretsey mentions in her text on interculturality and diversity. And the idea is that we are all fractals. Our identities are all fractals. So they are completely different. And yet they have patterns, they have things that like kind of cross within each other. All right. So then we move on to reflexivity, which is another core concept, which is an act of introspection, an ontological explanation of the self. So I look at myself, I understand myself, and it's also an epistemological use of the self, that is reflexivity. We like to take Sean's and the reflective practitioner's work. And in the development of intercultural awareness, reflexivity plays a crucial role since it implies a self-examination of one's own reality. Okay, so this is very important because I'm going to explain to you what we did with reflexivity. Finally, the final core concept is mediation. So mediation can be defined as any procedure, agreement, or action designed in a given social context to reduce the distance between two or more poles of otherness, between which or among which there is tension, okay? So this concept is going to be a key notion for interculturality because it's the one that helps us with, an action, yes, in order to carry out what interculturality is about. All right, so I'm going to move on to now the articulation and the course that I mentioned in my title. So this is a course that you have probably known about, is a MOOC in the Coursera platform, is understanding intercultural dimensions in everyday life. So the course is right now in 4 languages. We have right now over 5,600 students who have taken the course in general, and a good grade, which I'm happy about. And there is audiovisual input in Spanish, French, and English. That is the video lessons are in these languages. And there is a language choice for materials and tasks. That is, every student can take all the activities in the language that the person wants. So in Spanish, French, English, and recently, as of last year, in Portuguese. So everything has been now translated into Portuguese and subtitles in Portuguese. So this is a very important way to provide input and exposure, and what I'm going to call later learning multilingually, opportunities for students. All right, so this is us, like the people that I've been referring to. So my colleagues from Sorbonne Nouvelle Paris 3 at the bottom, and Anne-Marie and me, who are from Los Andes, and Paola and Muriel. So basically, these are the notions, and I wanted to leave them in Spanish because this is how I treated them in my course. So stereotypes, reflexivities, third spaces, diversity, language, identity, empathy, mediation, otherness, hybridity, translanguaging, and mise en oeuvre, which we translated as performativity into English. All right, so I'm going to tell you what we did very quickly, I know. So I took the course, and now my colleagues in France are doing the same. And we articulated the course with our regular program, with our regular courses, right? So we have synchronous course sessions, and we took the MOOC and kind of implemented it as in a flipped learning fashion. So students had to take the course, the MOOC, and then come to the sessions and discuss and deepen into the concepts and also complement what they have learned in the MOOC. And then they also have a very important component, which is the learning portfolio. And this is where this part of self-reflection is very important, because the students are not used to making a learning portfolio. They feel threatened. They feel scared that this is something they don't know how to do, because it's not, there are no patterns to make a portfolio. You just make it as you want to, right? So this is a very challenging but very interesting for research purposes, because it steers the multimodality and the semiotic resources that I'm sure Jose Aldemar is going to refer to tomorrow, the semiotic resources that students, take in order to create their learning, evidence. So what we did there was to combine all of those resources. So this is like a landscape of what we did, or TED Talks, videos, films, etc., books, etc. And in this study that I'm going to briefly present to conclude, I took 5 focalized graduate student cases and 15 focalized undergraduate student cases. So I'm not going to present them all, of course. What we did is I conducted some group interviews, and I analyzed the learning portfolio and some learning artifacts that derived from the course experience. And what we sought to do was understand the learner's experience in terms of their reflections and transformations expressed about themselves during and after the course. So that's why the learning artifacts are very important, and the group interviews after. Okay. All right. So reflections. So in terms of identities and configuration of the selves through reflexivity, I understood that this was a phenomenological approach of the self, or to the self. And this is something that really came afterwards to me as I was conducting the research. So how did I, arrive to this conclusion? So it really helped me to take on this perspective of Abdallah Pretsey, where she says that no fact is intercultural at the outset, nor is the quality of the intercultural attribute of an object. It is only the intercultural analysis that can give its character. So it is the person who is observing, it is the person who is like living the experience who actually tells me what interculturality is about for him or for her, okay? So I just want to show you a little bit of what happened, okay? So in terms of this approach, so students acknowledge the complexity of the self. Some of them were very harsh on themselves, also saying that I have a lot of stereotypes, that this is that I didn't know, that I was not recognizing the other, well, things like that. I'm not going to read because of time, but you have it there for the future. And I also want to show you a little bit of like what we found in the portfolio. So we had something called the me mapping, right? So they had to like conduct all these, deconstruction of the self in terms of intersectionality. They were able to project in their portfolio what they were learning in the language they wanted to. I did not ask them to do that. So you can see here an example of someone who wrote her portfolio in Spanish, English, and French. So this is one example. There is also a very interesting approach to the critical perspective of language learning and intercultural learning is about. So even though I did not propose much content, or we do not propose much content on native, communities in the MOOC, students actually fetched them, they provided them for their portfolios. So this is another example based on this interesting movie on two indigenous women who attend higher education here in Colombia. And they also projected, as I said, multimodal reflections. This one is fantastic because this is one student who wanted to reflect on the colors of the skin and how the colors of the pencils. In Spanish, you have a color that's the skin color of the color pencil. And this comic says, I want to draw my classmates and I want to find a skin color pencil. And the student replies, the other student replies, what is a skin color person for you? So in Spanish, we have color piel for a color, right? So what is this? So this is a very interesting reflection that derived from this. And also in the MOOC, this is part of the MOOC's activities. They were asked in an activity called Lost and Found in Translation to provide a term, all of these like untranslatable terms that you find in languages. So many of them chose indigenous local languages to choose the terms that they wanted to understand deeper. Okay, also, this is another reflection. We talked about the Wipala, the nation's, the original nation's flag. So this was very interesting for my students. So they projected this in the portfolio. Some of them did, and I was intrigued, but because I was not asking them to do so. And this is one final slide, because in the MOOC, my colleague Muriel Molinier asks to create a drawing of what she calls the mobilities of the self. So how do you move around yourselves and create, these trajectories of your own identities? And this student created something wonderful that I loved, which is she had not realized that the mobilities of the self also included mobilities within the regions of Colombia. So here she was like saying that she was blinded to this, and then she discovered that she had lots of like identities because she had lived in these different regions in Colombia, which can make part of the same country, but they are completely different from one another. Okay, so just to conclude, so the pedagogical possibilities that derive from this whole thing that I know I'm showing you too fast. So I have three things. So the articulation of a MOOC within a flipped learning modality, a game-based learning possibility, and also the immense, like the great advantages that having a learning portfolio can have for you and your students. So before we go, I want to know if we are still there, if you're still paying attention to me. So if you paid attention to the tiles that I have been projecting, can you write in the chat if you remember to which title the tiles were associated to? You can say 1, it was this, 2, it was this, 3, it was this. I know it was fast, but I want to try this because I want to talk about game-based learning. So this is part of the thing. So let me see the chat. Oh, I cannot see the chat, but I can see the one on YouTube. Okay. I'll take 10 seconds. Very good. Very good. Excellent. Yes, I can see some answers here. Excellent. Yes, exactly. So 3 was the conceptual lenses. So the core concepts that I presented, exactly. 1 was the articulation, the pedagogical articulation and the methodology. And 2 was the final part, which is the reflections. Okay, so this is like a very slight example of what you can do in your class, and this is what I'm going to finish with. Okay, so there it is. I created a lot of activities in this new modality, and I want to be very blunt with you. To me, the COVID crisis just like really stirred up my creativity as a teacher. So it was not at all frustrating for me. It was beyond exceptional what I was able to do with my students. So I think this is a very important thing to tell you all that you should try. So I created games routinely, for example, for stereotyping. Okay, so in this game, for example, and if you want it, I can share it with you in the link. I can share it in the chat, I'm sorry. And I created Jamboards of mediation, for example, mediation cases. And I also created a game based on a movie that we have to analyze for the MOOC, which is called Gran Torino. So in all of these scenarios, my students were vastly engaged. This was like one of the courses that I was like, that I had the most, the highest engagement rate ever. So I just wanted to have like this pedagogical reflection at the end, because it was an articulation with the MOOC, which they really liked, but also the fact, and this is what I have been discussing with my colleagues in France, the fact that I was there also to complement what was happening was very meaningful for them. So just to conclude, so interculturality was a challenging notion to grasp. Still, many students in the courses adhere to a functional perspective and only a few to a critical perspective, but all students went beyond the relational, which is the festivities and centered understanding, notion of interculturality. Learning multilingually. I don't know if you have heard of this group by Prue Holmes and their colleagues in England that they call it researching multilingually. So I wanted to honor them with this idea of learning multilingually. It's a challenging thing. Students were very upset at the beginning when they had to learn things that were in French, language. So it's like, I don't understand French. This is so hard. The way they teach, it's so different. But that was the idea. They cannot expect that we all behave the same, right? So it's challenging, but it's a necessary agenda. We need to incorporate and offer more of these choices and diverse input. And I really would like this MOOC to be translated into many more languages. We're on, that task of getting the funds to do that. And blended education is here to stay. So this is also a challenge for us as educators, but the diversity of tools and the possibilities to engage with students only depends on our imagination. So I really encourage you all to really try this with your students. And these new modalities of learning also enhance dynamics of hierarchical knowledge and co-construction. So we kind of tore down the walls of the hierarchy professor and students. And I think this has made it a much more, at least to me, horizontal interaction. Okay, This is one remark that I want to leave you by To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. But before I can live with other folks, I've got to live with myself. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. I want to thank you all for your attention. I'm sorry if I was too fast, but I wanted to show you the whole perspective. Please feel free to ask me questions and follow me. And here's my email. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Isabel, for your very interesting presentation. It's very nice to know what you've been able to accomplish with your students. We have just like time for one question. So this is the question we have for you. You share a successful experience in the promotion of language and intercultural awareness among students through MOOC, right? What would be the benefits and challenges of using MOOCs in language teacher education?
I think there are like huge benefits behind this. I used it with 5 of the students that I mentioned in the first case were graduate students, and they are all in-service teachers. And they, in this chapter that we're going to publish with Anne-Marie in Norvegia's and colleagues' books, we do have a section where we talk about the reflections for teachers themselves and for language, pre-service as well. It's that they are exposed not only to different registers of language, but also to different dynamics and different ways of doing, things, and also to reflecting and also to learning. So one of the things that many people found striking was how different French pedagogy was from Anne-Marie and mine. So, and I think that's good that we also encounter those different, ways of addressing and co-constructing knowledge. So I think that would be an advantage. I think it's, we tend to, when we kind of like go past that, we understand that languages are part of the whole spectrum. And we don't think of them as boundaries to access knowledge. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, and the challenges?
Oh, yes, and the challenges. Oh my God, there are many challenges as well. One of them is to be accurate in the translations, for example. For us, it took us a lot of time to translate the MOOC, even if we were a multilingual team, and to check everything and to also encourage people to not be frustrated about things that they don't understand. For example, the translations that I mentioned earlier about the French mise en oeuvre as performativity was a guess, like something that we understood Muriel was trying to convey in her module, but it was a challenging thing to kind of agree that was something that that we all understood as such. And also another challenge is that I think, and I think it's a flaw or a disadvantage of the MOOC, is that it's still in majority languages. I wish we could also have, I don't know if it's second part of the MOOC or something in minority languages or in native languages, or I think it is really still the resources that we can get are still in the majority languages. So that's one thing that I believe it's a disadvantage or a challenge.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sure we will have more questions for come next, which is our conversation with the researchers. And for that, I want to invite all of the presenters to turn on the videos and to be able to start with this conversation that, we want to have with you. We didn't want this event to be just like presentations and go very quickly. And we apologize for just cutting you all the time and be very concerned about time. But we really wanted to leave this last space, like an hour, to talk with you, based on the questions we have from the YouTube channel and the Zoom platform. And so what I would like to do now is to invite you. I don't know if Paula is with us here. I know Elena is, and we apologize, Elena. We know it's too late in Israel so far right now, but thanks for being with us still. I don't know if Paula is there.
Yes, I'm
Can
here.
you grant access to Paula? Yes, Paula's here. Adriana, what's the name of a master's student who's going to be in this conversation with us? Because Dr. Clavijo cannot be with us right now.
Alejandra Ramirez, it's the name of a student who was in the project with Professor Amparo Clavijo. Alejandra, are you here? I saw her a minute ago. Alejandra Ramirez.
If I want to add something, unfortunately, Professor Clavijo cannot join us in this part of the event, but she sent one of the members of the team that participated in the study. It's her name is Alejandra Rodriguez Benavides. She's an English foreign language teacher at Universidad Pedagógica Nacional, and she holds a BA in Spanish and foreign languages from Universidad Pedagógica Nacional, and currently she's a candidate in the MA program at Universidad Distrital. So we welcome her and we thank her very much for her presence and sharing her insights and answering the questions that Dr. Clavijo cannot do right now.
Okay, so the way I want to go about this right now is to ask you a general question that all of you can answer, and then I'll go I'm going to ask you one question based on the questions we had, as I said before, from the YouTube channel and from the Zoom platform. So the first question we want to discuss with you is if you can share something about the challenges that you have faced in your institutions to promote multilingualism or plurilingualism, as whatever you want to call it at this time. So maybe we can start with Elena. We'll follow the same order you presented.
Okay, so challenges in our universities, right? That's the thing. So first of all, I think there's a big challenge that always annoys me and I don't know what to do about it. And that's that while Israel is so multilingual, and you probably know the story how Hebrew had been revived and it been like a language that hadn't been used for a long time. And part of the Zionism of coming to Israel, it was the idea that we have to revive, make Hebrew the national language, and nation equals ideology. And it's always for, it's a language of loyalty, it's a language of affiliation, people who don't speak the language, other languages were, I mean, like what you see in many other countries once, but here it was coming from nothing in a way, not for nothing. Some people could read and write. So, but the reality, but this is kind of like any nation state, but the reality is that it's very diverse and we keep having immigrants and we have indigenous people, whether Arabs and Druze and other groups, and now lots of foreign workers and refugees. So what happens is these languages are really being ignored in schools. So very few, so you study a little bit, but you don't have an opportunity to maintain them. So why is it related to the university, my institution? The worst thing that I think is that there's no multilingualism at all at any of the higher education institution. Like, so the Arabs study in Arabic in schools, you know, but also Hebrew because they have, but mostly Arabic is the medium of instruction. The universities only study, the medium of instruction is only Hebrew and English. So you come to the university and you have no place for the language that you speak at home or that you know or you study. So the idea is that what does it do to your identity also? And I mean, like, and I wrote a lot of papers on that, so it's nothing new, but it's the biggest challenge for me, even when I say it. And so like, why can't we have medium of instruction of Arabic? I mean, there's, how do some teacher education, teacher colleges allow, they can do Arabic, but everything else is not. So this is something institutional that kind of is a built-in thing. And if you bring in, you say, teach, oh no, that's not, teach English, yeah, because everybody has to know English to go to universities and whatever, that's important. But you see this difference and the whole idea of what does it do to your identity, to your pride, let alone what I told you earlier today, that Arabic had been marginalized now officially even, and it's one of, so I think this is something in my institution, and I see it with the Arab students, because like at least half of my students are Arab students. You see, they come in the country in the same place, and for them, all of a sudden, Hebrew is a language. I mean, Hebrew is the language, the second language, and they have to, and they don't know how to write well, they don't know how to read well, they have to always interpret the teacher, and they next to them is somebody for whom Hebrew is the first language. Mm-hmm. So this kind of institutionally bothers me very much. It's issues of rights and so on. I'm sure you know, but I write a lot about it. It's something I don't see that I can ever change in my lifetime anyway.
Okay, thank you, Elena. Paula?
You mean challenges at the institution, either carrying out the research?
Or the promotion, the question was about the promotion of multilingualism.
Mm-hmm. I already refer some of the challenges that we faced in the research that I already mentioned may have a place in the challenges that I see as a director fostering an intercultural agenda at my university. And precisely those challenges that I faced, like ideas of English dominance, the idea that because of that dominance, more budget should be placed to initiatives fostering English as a language. Those ideologies, those hegemonic ideologies, I think are the greatest challenge. And that has influenced not only carrying out the studies that I described, but also I've seen them permeating the conversations that I've had with different actors, with different stakeholders, not only within the institution, even though at the institution, because of this pedagogical kind of dialogue that I've tried to foster as a director, but also I've seen there more support. But within like the city with different actors, I've seen that there is a greater push to develop an agenda of English only as an L2 because of economic reasons, economic development reasons. However, I've seen that with younger populations, the uses of language, the uses that they give to languages, for example, with Korean being a language to connect to the Korean people through popular culture. I think those uses need to be from us, the ones in the academia. We need to make more visible those uses so that they influence decision-making processes. And that they see the plurilingual projects more as integral. So I see myself as a director when we are talking with mayors, for example, when we are trying to come up with a project to develop in their town or city. What I see is me trying to convince that the agenda needs to be more integral of not only education to language teachers, but also to the general population, and also the development of translation services. The development of linguistic landscape projects to make indigenous languages more visible in towns, that would generate a different kind of awareness of languages. That takes time and that takes consistency. So I am really hoping that the ones that make those negotiations later on, after I finish my term as a director, continue with those, don't give up in that conversation.
Okay. thank you for those insights about what the possibilities we can have at the university. Isabel.
In our case, I'd like to not only refer to the university because, as you may know, the university I belong to is a private institution. So there are other things that are, that you can add to this, context. And one of the things that I believe we could do is communicate with each other more. And I think Elena was very emphatic on something that I am feeling a lot of frustration about right now, is that I feel disconnected from what's happening with the rest of the country just because I belong to a private institution. So, and also that even if I have the intention to collaborate with public institutions, there is a lot of interest and administrative things that get in the way. But I wanted to particularly address one thing that really caught my attention recently, is that there is an intention of the government to implement French lessons or French, again, in our national curriculum in schools. And I think, and this is like recent, you can look it up in the paper, and this is a recent thing that is very much driven by the same, interest that English has been driven always, which is an economic perspective and like this multinational, interest behind. And I think once again, we're being left out, our diversity is being left out. And the fact that we cannot communicate with each other and make ourselves stronger in this advocacy that Elena was telling us, that for them, it took a while, like 20 years is a long time. And we have been like writing papers, we have been like addressing this in many conferences, but still the government just announced that despite all that we have been like saying, we are still like having another majority language in public schools, which I don't deny. I think it's a good idea, but I also think that students who could benefit from this intercultural approach, for example, could really be much more enriched in their experience of education if they approach themselves to the native and ancestral background. So this is like one reflection that I wanted to address here. And in our research group, which I, by the way, want to thank all of you who are there and commented on the chat, and all of my colleagues who are there, we are trying to make this a permanent discussion in our research group. And we invite people who want to belong to a research group and like who have different languages from the ones that we commonly work on to join us and, think collectively. I think that's like my invitation.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have Alejandra, who's here on behalf of Amparo.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. Thanks.
Great. Okay. So good morning. Thank you very much for having me here. Well, I think one of the challenges we faced as a group was we arrived to the school and we thought that maybe the teachers didn't know about this approach to teaching of community-based pedagogies and this place-based education. And we noticed that they already were doing something like that, maybe because of the privileged location of the schools that are in the downtown of Bogota, where there are many museums and a lot of cultural capital, yes, the access to cultural and to many things. So I think that take for granted that other people don't know what you're talking about is a challenge you face. And actually, well, we also discovered that there are these assets that they are like taking advantage of, but there are others that maybe they are overlooking. Yeah, so also downtown is a place where there are many other realities. The fact that these students lived in some other places in the city, but they go there because their parents work there, that they are children that there has been a displacement and the phenomena like gentrification that Professor was talking about. So there are other things that we can take into account in the curriculum and that teachers might be overlooking, but they are in the process of understanding that there are more for them to take into account in their classes.
Okay, thank you, Alejandra. Now I want to address one question to each one of you based on the many questions that we have here, and I'll start with Elena. So one question we have is, how has this new multilingual policy have an impact on standardized testing, especially in mandatory national tests for secondary students, for example?
Okay, so far, as I mentioned, the project is not finished, but somehow the project is still in operation. I mean, we took a break, we had no choice because we got the funding from other places to do it, but because of the situation and our government decided that it can operate very well without a budget. So all of a sudden everything was taken away. So anyway, so we'll be able to get feedback. But I think in terms of the multilingual testing, it's really, I sometimes feel it's like linguistic landscape. It's spreading very big time. I mean, you see lots of articles. There's another special issue coming out now. There is another, you see lots of places. ALTE, Association of Language Testing of Europe, is doing a conference which was supposed to be last year, and it's online now in April, also on multilingual assessment with different ways of doing it. It's almost like, how can you talk about multilingualism without doing testing? So I think so far, I see lots of places that are doing it individually. And even one of the people who was the chief something in the ministry said, oh, this is something very easy to do. You just translate the test and you get it, you can do them. And I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but I think the whole idea of building on your own language. And we see, and it's very easy to convince people to do it because you say, wow, you came to Israel, how long did it take you to learn a language? Oh, I never learned it. Oh, we have this data of 9 to 11. So it's kind of, we have data. And this is one thing I wanted to say. So I think these research, when we get back to normal life again, okay, then you see these kind of things that it's catching people. I think the language testing field, standardized test is the end, but it's almost, what are the new things now? Okay, literacy, but they don't really come up with very new ideas and they never give it. So I think this is catching. I hear, I get messages, it's a group of people that's doing it, and they're all gonna get hopefully into testing institutions and do it. I think it's the whole multilingual thing also caught like fire. Everybody's doing multilingualism now, right? Nobody knows what it really is, but still it's being done. So that's very strange. But I wanted to say something, and that kind of to bring us to today, what will happen after COVID? And I think this is really the big question, because we see that the gaps, neoliberalism is going to win again and more. We see kids, like I just got funded to do a study now, what happens to immigrant kids in Israel when they study with the Zoom or any online method. And the situation, we just started the study about a week ago, and it's funded by the Ministry of Education, by the way. Seems like there's no learning at all. I mean, some people are saying, oh, they learn the home language because we don't know, we'll see, because they're at home. But the parents are not at home usually. So I think we have to really jump forward, and we may be, and as we see the situation with women, that we may be going much backward, and it will take us years to come back to any of the dreams we had, talk about multilingualism, talk about testing or anything. I think what we see in our country, and I'm sure you see it in your country too, is like the power of the dictators, the people who run the countries, and they can do anything in the name of fear. So for me, this is not disconnected. I still will do my things, but I'm afraid, very afraid of what will happen. And we already have some data from different people that it's really bad. They've totally neglected those kids.
Okay, Thank you, Elena. We have one question here for Paula. How has the partnership between UDEA and the towns where the university has regional sites worked to support and promote alternative bilingual projects?
Well, again, as I said, thank you for the question, whoever asked it. As I said before, I see myself struggling, trying to convince of develop local government officials that other kinds of agendas, I mean, an agenda different to the one that they see motivated to put forth based on bilingual ideas. Bilingualism understood as English-Spanish needs to be an agenda like a different one, an alternative one needs to be developed. I think Universidad de Antioquia has a great power to establish alliances with different local governments. However, governments of small towns, smaller towns outside Valle de Aburrá, our metropolitan area, have very limited budget to develop projects. So sometimes they want to develop projects, alternative projects, but there's no budget. And the kind of dialogue that Universidad de Antioquia has with different officials of different municipalities is also influenced by the mayor's staff, the educational level they have, the kind of education they've had. They have different kind of awareness depending on that education they've had. In one particular town, for example, some of them, like most of the mayor staff, they speak English and they've been educated abroad. The mayor himself has been educated abroad. So that gives him a different kind of awareness of the kind of economic projects that they can develop within the town. So as a university, we have a great desire to have an impact on those smaller towns. However, money is an issue. And sometimes we get to develop some collaborations that do not require a large budget, but it's difficult. So budget definitely in the establishment of these alliances is an issue. It's an important factor.
Okay, thank you, Paula. We have one question here for Alejandra, and it says, can we then talk about multicultural gentrification for the sake of tourist industry in zones such as La Candelaria and Bogotá and El Corralito?
Okay, thank you. So we have been thinking about this topic of gentrification from two perspectives. One, there's economic development for the downtown, and there are possibilities for tourism, and many people come to the city center. You know, there are many things to see, so many people come there, and there is job. That's why parents go to work there while students go to these schools in the downtown. But we were also thinking about like the disadvantages of this for some people. So Maria, that is a woman who was born in Candelaria, she says, now Candelarios, there are no Candelarios in Candelaria anymore. Yeah, so we moved to some other places because it is impossible to live in this part of the city because it has become a really expensive place to live. So the fact that parents have to come to this place to work and students have to move every day to study here, it is also about inequities. Yes, and why do they have to go there to work, and why is there the only possibility for them to find a job and for students to study? Yeah, so I think there are two perspectives to that phenomena of gentrification.
Okay, thank you so much. We have one question here for Isabel. As MOOCs target a massive audience, have you explored how students from areas other than education respond to the course?
Areas other than education. Yes, we have very interesting data from Coursera. And actually, well, I can give you a couple of, interesting facts about this. Like our MOOC is mostly, if not like 80%, followed by women. Our second country is Mexico. Like we would think it was going to be France, but actually it's Colombia, Mexico, and France, like the most, registered participants. And also they come from all kinds of backgrounds and disciplines. So it's not just like education, on its own, if that was a question, like many different backgrounds, especially management, like not especially management, but like one particular one is, management and internationalization.
Okay, thank you. We have, again, one question for all of you, which is that based on your research experience, what recommendations do you have for undergraduate and graduate teacher education programs to address language diversity? Mm-hmm. And we will start with Elena again.
Okay. Okay, so everything this requires a lot of thinking, but one of the things I would say is that something I actually wanted to say, and the reason I decided to talk about research is because I think we have to really we have to create situations whereby teachers feel confident enough to do research. Because from my own experience, I see the only thing that really works is to bring research data results. I mean, so the reason we do qualitative and quantitative, as I showed you today, is because the quantitative really has an effect on bureaucrats. The qualitative is always for us to really go to find out really what is happening there. But I think we cannot put aside the value of how bureaucrats look at numbers and I think this is why where we showed that with this experimental versus control group, that the students who did the two versions, both languages, they did twice as much better. And they are basically there to show achievements and to show that they perform, so the parents are happy, and and it comes out in the papers. Nobody cares about what we find in the qualitative, but the qualitative helps us bring other things, of course. So I think teachers need to be to really be proficient in action research, really, but action research that can speak, that can really convince them. And I think from what I see, the teachers are so tired now, especially, they're so tired. They say that there are so many hours on Zoom or whatever. And I think we really created a situation where teachers, number one, they were facing with things which are impossible to do in such a short time, let alone to do research. But I think they have to be the data collectors. And I must say that when I talked about the language policy in Israel, these are all our MA students participating with us. It created a great department just because of those research studies. They like to do research, students and teachers especially, and they know the classroom. I cannot really go freely into the classroom. I haven't been to one for a while in the classroom in schools, I mean. So, and the reason we applied again for the study about what I mentioned to you now, how immigrant kids function in the COVID, and how much they learn, how much they don't learn, what happens there, is because we wanted to engage our students who are all teachers. Many times they have to experience this valuable experience in research is really, really fantastic. So I would say they have to really take more responsibility. And when they come to the university, they do that. We do all kind of things. We do like newspaper articles now, a newspaper of our program. You know that? This is so good. Just tried it last semester for the first time. They come up with a newsletter about what's happening in language, and very, very critical. And we advertise it everywhere. And it's really fantastic. We get such good feedback, and students are involved. So I think to involve them, I mean, newspapers is important, newsletter, but I think but it touches issues. I wish I maybe, by the way, the newsletter is all multilingual. It's in 4 languages. Sometimes one part is like that, and I have to send you a copy, really nice, of this recent one. I'll send to Janet, and maybe you can do to the others. So here we are, multilingual education program, publishes in multilingually, so to speak. But I think, so that's one thing symbolically, but I think in terms of research, it's very, very important, and it's not hard to learn. And students, MA students, they like it, and they find it, and to actually engage them in projects. So I would say that's something, I would never do a study that, every study I do is to change something, to be honest with you. I don't touch other things. I don't care about theoretical linguistics or something like that, you know. But it's always like activism, and, you know, to try to change. And if you have to find out why and how it changed. This is why I showed you the first slide. We did lots of activities for 20 years, but we managed at one point to get the right person, and he gave us the money, basically. And it's like, so I think teachers now, and now even more, just the last sentence, we getting used to seeing teachers as servers. Remember, we talked about it in class. They carry out orders of the ministry, of the curriculum, or whatever, but they don't really get responsibility because we don't give it to them. I don't even see one teacher in any of the committees that make all those decisions when children will go to school and when not. And apropos, Paula, also mayors are not involved, and they do all the work for their schools. So I think we really have to, maybe one other thing, we have to really change the attitude. But another thing is the whole idea of tests, and maybe that's to answer your question from before, Ana Maria, because it's a lot about, look, now, I don't know what happens in Colombia, but I can tell you in our class, any students who are in 11th and 12th grade, where they have grades, which have to take the test, they are the first ones to come back to school. In Norway, they abolished those tests. You know, we said, why? How can they learn? How can they do the matriculation end of high school? In our case, yes, what message are we sending to the country? That the most important thing in school is tests, 11th and 12th grade, the tests. Nobody says the word learning even anymore. Oh, what will happen? They won't be able to take their tests. And the universities even put stronger pressure on schools to make, what do you mean the test is the most important? Come on, this is not a message you want to send about what schools have to do. And this means the only tests are the testers are important, not the teachers, not the learning. So this is from now, I think these are some of the issues that we have to.
Okay. Thank you, Elena. I don't know if Paula wants to go next or whomever feels ready to share ideas.
I can go next. Okay. I want to just repeat what I said during my presentation. There are 2 lessons for me reinforced from these research projects. And that's that context and student identity are crucial in curriculum design. But there is one more lesson, particularly from the study on language use and investment, that has really been important to me. And that's that in language education and language teacher education, we have focused a lot on methodology and teaching. The best method to teach a language. And that combines with what Elena just said. How do we better prepare our students for a test? And then the tests become the content of the curriculum. Yeah. I think we teachers need to, we language teachers and language teacher educators should rather focus a lot more on language use, observe language use. I feel that our students, with this data that we have from Universidad de Antioquia students, that there is a rich use among students of just English or Japanese. But those uses are not the same ones necessarily that we have in the classroom. So it's like a separate educational learning agenda. We need to focus a lot more on learning and focusing, and I think that by focusing on language use and observing actual learning use, we are going to be able to get more information to develop safer, richer language learning environments in the classroom or whatever, or class, since now we are not located in classrooms, but in language learning environments.
Thank you, Paula. I don't know if Alejandra or Isabel wants to go first.
Okay, so I will continue. Well, I think for me, I am not the lead in the group, but I think something really valuable of our group is that there are undergraduate students, graduate students, and researchers, experienced researchers. So there are many voices that encounter there, and I think that is important. Yes, not only having a research doing from these experienced researchers, that is very valuable, but also having these other voices that are important and that help, that everybody has something to say, and what they have to say, what we have to say as master students or as undergraduate students is also important. Also, I think it's very motivating and encouraging to learn about research, doing research. So learning, collating that data, and interacting with participants and everything is very encouraging, and well, in my experience has been great. And the other thing is about these false borders ideas of doing participatory research that is not always top down, but it includes and has an horizontal and equal relationship between participants and researchers, and that understand participants as equals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Alejandra. And Isabel?
Ana, there is a question on the Google Doc for Alejandra and Isabel at the end of the...
Oh, I read it, but it's not a question. It's just like a comment.
Yeah, I just posted the question I had.
Okay, so let me just go and check it. For Alejandra, and let me... Janet, I don't see it. Can you read it, please?
Yes, I'll read it. You've talked about multiculturality and interculturality, which implies the concept of culture. Can you share your understanding of what culture is and its relation to language education?
Okay.
How you understand culture?
I can go first if you like, Alejandra. This is a really tough question, and I do not pretend to provide a definition of culture. I just actually, this was part of an interesting conversation we had with Jose Aldemar and Carlos Rico a few weeks ago, and I just wanted to highlight two authors that, for me, like, besides Clark Cramsh, of course, I think this is a very important reference for all of us as language teachers. And I think her latest book on language and power, to me, really encapsulates like what this should be about. Like, I think beyond understanding what culture means, I think I would, rather turn the question around and say what culture does, and what it's doing for us is that it has been, influencing our ways of conceiving the world and through these hegemonic structures. And I think we have been thinking that there are certain cultures which are better than our culture or our, set of, culturalities, if I want to quote Abdallah says, like she says, culturalities is like our ways of like, being diverse. So I would like to think of culture that way, what culture is doing for us, our set of, manifestations, expressions, and all of that. And also another author that I referred to in this conversation was Raymond Williams, who is like one of the founders of cultural studies. And I really like his definition of culture, which is culture. Well, it's not a definition, it's a characterization of culture. It's that culture is ordinary. So the fact that we all have this, and it's not a special thing. It's like everyday kind of things. That is culture. And for us language teachers, I would just like rephrase that and say that what we do with culture is ordinary. So that would be like my 2 cents to this major question.
Yeah, a difficult one. All right, and Alejandra?
Well, I agree, it's a very difficult question. I think, well, I won't either give a definition of culture, but I think from our point of view, from our research and what we're doing, I think what is important is to appreciate the diversity of students' backgrounds or of what they know, and of wherever the linguistic landscape and the surroundings and the places offering us for including in the curriculum. Mm-hmm. That's what I have to say about that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, since it's like 20 minutes to finish, I'm gonna ask the last question for all of you. And this time you can go any order to answer. So the question is, how can we strengthen the visibility and respect towards minority languages and speakers, transcending exotic and pitiful views? Was that a tough one too?
I can briefly provide my perspective, and I think what the colonial, lenses of research are offering us is a very good way to do this. I think valuing the ancestral paradigms is a very challenging thing to do. And many of our colleagues who are doing research right now within these paradigms, and I'm sure tomorrow you will hear about that too. And also what you were mentioning earlier, like acknowledging what is done here. So I don't know if you noticed, but I was trying to cite and reference in my presentation colleagues who are not very much known. I know Elena is a mainstream and I could have cited her, right? But I would like to also acknowledge other scholars' work, because that's what we should do. Like, I'll acknowledge our local, epistemological views. And I respect and admire all of my colleagues who do that, mainstream and not mainstream. And I think that's one activity or one way to start doing that.
Right. Thank you, Isabel. Who's going to be next?
I can go next.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer. It's a tough question. It's like one of those constantly ongoing questions, because it's a great challenge. It's not a question, it's a project. Well, some of you know I have this daughter. She's in 5th grade. And one day we were talking about the heritage languages that we teach at the university. A conversation I had with her, made me think that our children learn about heritage cultures like it's something of the past. Like it's something that happened when Christopher Columbus arrived in America. That detachment, that feeling that these communities are something of the past, is of course influencing our way of relating to these cultures and their languages, because they're foreign. They're foreign. It's like, it's not us. So who's us, right? It's this, and here I think what Isabel is saying is very powerful, because that's one of the things. It's an easy thing to do, but it's difficult because our minds in Latin America are so colonialized by Eurocentric thought, that we would need to first change our attitudes and our ways to seeing ourselves as people, being part of all these different heritages. The Arabic in us through the Spaniards, the Spanish in us, all these different traditions and communities that are part of our identities. Like naming them, I think is crucial for us as teachers, for us as individuals. But that's like a life project. So I will leave it there, because I don't have just one answer. It's this thing that we're always, as scholars, have to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, commit with that project, with that as a project.
That could be a question for a research study. I mean, to explore those pitiful and of exotic ways we have to look at, sometimes minorities and speakers. So we'll see. I don't know, Elena, if you want to go next.
I will continue. So, well, this question made me think about all the murals that are in the downtown of Bogota of indigenous people, and this has been somehow also two perspectives. It can be seen as we are showing that we have diversity of cultures and of groups here in the country, but some other views say that they are an exotic way of showing these cultures, and that you can see indigenous people in the downtown asking for money, for example. Yes, and next to there is a beautiful mural of an indigenous person with all their garments, their clothes, and their traditional ways of dressing and everything. Now, I was thinking about that because in the interviews, in the data we collected, some people were saying that, okay, we should contrast what is going on in reality and what we see in the downtown and when we go and take the picture next to the mural. That is really beautiful. So I think starting problematizing is a way of starting to think about that, start speaking about that, problematizing the situation that this is what we see here and this is what is going on in reality. We also talked in the group about, okay, yes, the beautiful mural and the president in campaign going there, and then in the Cauca, this big problem that it was there. So try to contrast and to see and to problematize. I think it's a way to start, just to start, because it's a long way to go, but I think it's a good way of a start.
Okay, thank you, Alejandra. And finally, Elena, do you have any words on that? Any thoughts? Your microphone is off, Elena.
I'm kind of confused about the topic because I don't know, you see, it's like a different country. You come from a country where our culture is being so glorified on the account of others. For me, I have very strange views about it because I think it's sometimes having this culture and the heritage and everything is becoming so powerful. It's kind of like the Hebrew language. You take the past and you make it today and you overdo it and you don't know when is the time. Why did Hebrew become so powerful here? And I wrote a lot about the victims of Hebrew. I'm more interested in victims of tests and victims of languages. And I'm afraid that I'm worried about glorifying past cultures always, because I think past without present is useless, you know. That's something that we have to understand in terms of relationship among cultures, and that kind of will bring us to a better future. I don't think the past was always so good, you know. Sometimes I think there are different pasts, you know, good, bad. We were also treated others not so good. What's so great about it? You know, it's like we have to look at things in Israel, like the Holocaust is being so glorified that we forget about the future. It's being used for every atrocity you can imagine, you know, just because we were victims. And now, wow, we were victims. I mean, it's overdone, and it's over. We have the right to do anything, and we have the right to do anything to others. So what becomes the other, and what becomes, I think it's a much more complex issue to always, you know, oh, the past. I mean, I understand how it is in Colombia or in other countries in South America, but still, I find I'm not completely, you see, for me, growing up in Israel, we are all products of where we grow. And for me, what we did with what we are doing with other culture, our culture, is very frightening, and it damages, it hurts, and it damages many others. And more, I like so much when Isabel said the mediation. Without mediation, nothing happens really. The world is so cruel because of ethnicity, and the borders sometimes are so cruel in terms of what is a border, what is considered like this, what is considered like that, who is. And I kind of want to get away with that. I'd like to see ourselves as people, and mediation and the MOOCs and everything you talked about, Isabel, really so impressive for me, because it's so much about let's try to make the future better. The past is important, not saying for some things, but we have to be careful about what conclusions we reach from the past in given contexts. Okay.
Thank you, Elena. I think we have time for one more question, but this is addressed to Alejandra. Someone is asking, I would like to know if the study contrasted the representations of those minority groups, indigenous, for instance, with the actual images and conditions they live in.
Well, we are still in the process of doing data analysis, and talking about our categories. But yes, we want to talk about that, especially I would say that in the implications of developing this place-based pedagogy that goes beyond the traditional curriculum and traditional ways of teaching and learning.
Okay, thank you, Alejandra. All right, I don't know, we have just like less than 10 minutes left, and I want to thank you all, I mean, the presenters and the people who have been connected through the YouTube channel or the Zoom platform, for being with us for these more than 4 hours. I guess for some of us it's more than 4 hours already. But thank you so much to all of the presenters for these very interesting projects, the insights you provided for graduate and undergraduate programs for teacher education, language teacher education in particular. And as we, maybe many of all of you received our program, we specified there what were the purposes of doing this symposium. And it's because we in the master's program are interested in starting to construct research agendas with other people in Colombia or abroad, because we believe we need to start, construct common agendas for research that can have an impact of what is happening in education, but more particularly in language education, which is what we do, and to start, becoming more activists, as Elena mentioned, to have some agency, but also including the communities around us, which is one of the things that we learned from Dr. Clavijo project, which is we need to start constructing those research agendas with the communities. It's not about us only, because we are involved with students, we have parents involved, we have, as Elena mentioned, we need to start including also majors and all those people who are in government positions to work with us. And I think it's the only way, but this is a personal opinion, it's the only way we can ever have any impact in language policies in our country. And I think it works the same for other countries. So we thank you a lot for being here. And this conversation is going to continue tomorrow. We have other 4 hours of conversation with different researchers who are invited. And so I don't know if Janet, if you want to say something else to close, perhaps reminding people about tomorrow's agenda before we go. Janet, are you here still? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna, for guiding this conversation today with our presenters. As Anna just mentioned it, we are very pleased to have you here to listen to the work that you've been doing and to find so many connections, so many things we have in common in our interests and research agendas that, as Elena pointed it out, are about making transformation, right? Like starting from small moves and trying to achieve changes in the places where we work and where we interact. So thank you very much for sharing. And of course, I want to invite you to join our conversation with tomorrow's presenters. Just give me a second to go to the program. I'm gonna share quickly my screen so you can see tomorrow's program. This is our program for tomorrow, day 2, February 26th. We're gonna have Dr. Angela Cree's presentation at the beginning on learning from the bilingual teacher. We have Professor Jaime Uzma and myself talking about a project we have conducted with ethnic community students at Universidad de Antioquia, and also with foreign language teachers at the university. We have our colleagues, Professor Norbella Miranda and Jose Aldemar Alvarez from Universidad del Valle, who are working also with indigenous undergraduate students in a sociolinguistic profile at Universidad del Valle. And we have Dr. Germana Carolina and Dr. Guillaume Brooks from Universidad de Caldas, also working on in a project on the representation of indigenous students' languages and the foreign languages that they're learning. So we're gonna have a very interesting conversation tomorrow as well. And we invite you to join us tomorrow at 8 o'clock again. Thank you very much indeed, and have a nice afternoon.
And thank you very much.
Thank you, Elena. We know it's around 7 p.m. in Israel. You must be absolutely worn out. Thank you. Thank you very much for staying with us your whole afternoon until 7 p.m.
Very interesting. Tomorrow too.
And tomorrow too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. It was super interesting.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.